My name is Natalie, and I am 32 years old. We are not wasting our time on your pathetic little promotion ceremony, my father said, waving his hand with utter disgust. A low-level desk clerk at the Treasury getting a tiny pay bump is hardly worth a celebration. Look at your brother. He just closed a $50 million government contract. But 2 weeks later, when the Washington Post published a front-page photograph of me walking out of the Pentagon escorted by 6 heavily armed federal agents, my mother's phone rang nonstop. "Natalie, we need to talk," she demanded frantically. "Family meeting tomorrow. I showed up to that meeting, but I did not bring an apology or a sense of obedience. I brought an asset seizure warrant. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who underestimated your worth and tried to tear you down." The evening that set this entire chain of events into motion took place at an exclusive Washington, D.C. steakhouse, the kind of establishment where senators and corporate lobbyists conducted their backroom deals over dry-aged ribeyes and imported scotch. The air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic, seared meat, and old money. I sat at a heavy mahogany table across from my parents, Richard and Eleanor, trying to maintain a pleasant expression. Beside them sat my older brother Connor, radiating his usual arrogant charm. Next to him was his wife Naomi. Naomi was a brilliant African-American woman who had built a fierce reputation as a corporate compliance lawyer in Virginia. She sat quietly sipping her sparkling water, her sharp eyes missing absolutely nothing. I had invited them to dinner to share what I thought was good news. I had just been promoted to department head. I kept my actual job title vague, letting them believe I was simply climbing the slow bureaucratic ladder at the Department of the Treasury. In reality, I was the lead forensic financial auditor for a covert anti-corruption task force operating jointly under the Department of Justice and the Pentagon. My job was hunting down massive federal fraud rings, tracking ghost accounts, and dismantling money laundering operations. But to my parents, I was just their disappointing plain daughter who chose a boring government job over a real career. "I finally got the promotion I have been working toward," I announced, trying to inject some enthusiasm into the conversation. "They gave me the department head position this morning." My mother Eleanor did not even look up from her plate. She meticulously cut a piece of her steak, chewed it slowly, and let out a derisive scoff. "A promotion," she repeated the word, dripping with condescension. "Does that mean the government is finally paying you enough to buy a decent pair of shoes? You look like a substitute teacher, Natalie. Eat up so you have the energy to slave away at a cubicle for the rest of your life. Working for the state means you will never even be able to afford a handbag like the one your sister-in-law Naomi carries." She used her fork to spear a piece of meat from her plate and casually tossed it onto mine, exactly the way someone would feed a stray dog. "Eat," she commanded. "You look exhausted, and frankly, it is embarrassing to sit next to you." I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest, but I kept my face entirely neutral. Years of conducting high-stakes interrogations with white-collar criminals had taught me how to mask my emotions flawlessly. Before I could even formulate a polite response, Connor slammed his hand down on the table, grinning broadly. "Enough about civil servant pay grades," he interrupted loudly, making sure the neighboring tables could hear him. "Let us talk about real success. I am buying the next round of drinks because Apex Green just won the federal energy infrastructure bid. $50 million in government funding hits our corporate accounts by next Friday." Richard's face immediately turned red with pride. He stood up slightly, raising his glass of expensive bourbon toward my brother. "That is my boy," my father boomed. "I knew you would secure that contract. $50 million is just the beginning for you, Connor. In fact, your mother and I were talking this morning. We are going to mortgage the family estate to give you a cash injection for your expansion. You are doing massive things, and you need liquid capital to keep the momentum going." I sat completely frozen, my fingers gripping the stem of my water glass so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded against my ribs, not out of jealousy, but out of sheer, unadulterated shock. Apex Green. The name echoed in my mind like a siren. Apex Green was not a legitimate sustainable energy firm. It was a sophisticated network of shell companies that my cyber forensics team had been tracking for the past 8 months. It was a massive fraud operation designed to siphon federal grant money into offshore cryptocurrency accounts. And my brother, the golden child of the family, was the CEO I had been trying to unmask. I stared at Connor, watching him laugh and clink his glass against my father's. He was a criminal. He was actively stealing from the federal government, and my parents were so blinded by their obsession with his fake success that they were willing to risk their own home to fund his felonies. When the waiter finally approached our table at the end of the night, he carried a thick leather folder. He placed it discreetly in the center of the table. My father grabbed it, opened it, and let out a low whistle. $4,500, he announced, looking directly at me. He casually slid the leather folder across the polished wood until it rested right next to my plate. Since you just got that big promotion, Natalie, you can treat the family tonight. Consider it a lesson in the real value of money. Connor is doing big things, and his capital needs to stay liquid for his company. You are single and have no real responsibilities, so this should not be a problem. I looked down at the receipt, then back up at my father's smug face. You want me to pay a $4,500 dinner bill so Connor can keep his money liquid? I asked, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. Just like you needed my college savings to stay liquid when Connor wrecked his sports car while driving drunk at age 20. You forced me to drain my entire bank account to pay off the driver he hit so he would not press charges and ruin his pristine record. Connor's face instantly contorted with rage. He lunged forward, his hand gripping his water glass so hard I thought he was going to throw it right at my face. Shut your mouth, Natalie. He snarled, his charming facade vanishing in a split second. You owe this family. You have always been a bitter, jealous little brat who cannot stand the fact that I am a winner and you are a nobody. Eleanor immediately jumped to her son's defense, glaring at me with absolute fury. How dare you bring the past up right now, she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. Your brother made one minor mistake when he was a boy. He is a multi-million-dollar executive now, and you are trying to humiliate him because you are cheap. Pay the bill and stop embarrassing us. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply opened my purse and pulled out my payment card. It was not a standard credit card. It was a solid, matte black government travel charge card issued exclusively to high-ranking federal task force directors for unrestricted operational expenses. It had no limit, backed entirely by the Department of Defense. I placed it on the silver tray and handed it to the waiter. My mother rolled her eyes, letting out a harsh, mocking laugh. Taking out high-interest credit cards just to look wealthy is pathetic, Natalie. You are going to spend the next 5 years paying off this one dinner just to prove a point. It is genuinely sad to watch. I ignored her, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Naomi shifting in her seat. Her eyes were locked onto the black card, resting on the waiter's tray. As a top-tier compliance lawyer who regularly dealt with federal regulations, she recognized the distinct seal and the microchip design of a high-clearance government card. She looked from the card up to my face, her expression shifting from polite indifference to intense calculating curiosity. She knew I was not a low-level desk clerk. In that brief moment of eye contact, an unspoken understanding passed between us. After the waiter returned my card and I signed the receipt, the family moved out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. The valet station was crowded with luxury vehicles. While we waited for my modest sedan and Connor's flashy SUV, Connor grabbed my arm roughly and pulled me behind a large concrete pillar away from the rest of the group. Listen to me very carefully, he muttered, his breath smelling of expensive bourbon and desperation. I know you work in the Treasury system. I am launching a new subsidiary for Apex Green next week, and the federal auditors are demanding an independent verification consultant to sign off on the compliance documents. I need you to give me your social security number and sign the paperwork stating you audited my firm. I stared at him, feeling a mixture of disgust and professional fascination. He was casually asking me to commit federal wire fraud and perjury to help him bypass a government audit. I am not signing anything for you, Connor, I replied, stepping back and pulling my arm out of his grip. I do not mix my professional life with your business. Connor's eyes darkened and the true extent of his malice surfaced. Do not play games with me, Natalie. You live in grandfather's old house. Mom and dad still hold the deed to that property. If you do not sign these consulting papers by tomorrow afternoon, I will tell them I need more capital. I will make them sell that house right out from under you. You will have 30 days to pack your garbage and find a new place to live. You either work for me or you end up homeless. I stood in the dim light of the parking garage looking at the golden child of the family. He really believed he held all the power. He really believed I was just a helpless younger sister he could manipulate and destroy at will. Do not threaten me, Connor. I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. You have absolutely no idea what you are dealing with. I turned and walked away before he could respond. I tipped the valet, got into my car, and drove 3 blocks away before pulling into a quiet side street. I put the car in park and took a deep breath. I reached into the passenger seat, unzipped my secure briefcase, and pulled out my encrypted military-grade laptop. I placed my thumb on the biometric scanner and logged directly into the Department of Defense secured server network. The glowing screen illuminated the dark interior of my car. I pulled up the task force database and typed in the parameters. Apex Green, Connor, corporate hierarchy routing. I hit enter. The screen buffered for 2 seconds before flashing a brilliant aggressive red. Across the top of the monitor, bold white letters confirmed exactly what I already knew, but seeing it officially documented sent a thrill of adrenaline straight through my veins. Class A investigation target. Primary offense, federal wire fraud. Secondary offense, aggravated money laundering. My own brother was not just a scam artist. He was the primary target of the biggest federal takedown my department had planned all year, and my parents had just happily volunteered to tie their own financial safety to his sinking ship. I closed the laptop, a cold, genuine smile finally breaking across my face. They wanted to treat me like a failure. They wanted to threaten my home and demand my obedience. They were about to learn exactly how much power a supposedly pathetic desk clerk actually possessed. The morning sun barely crests the Potomac River when I swipe my badge at the Pentagon's subterranean security checkpoint. Passing through 3 separate biometric scanners, I leave the civilian world entirely behind. My parents still think I spend my days stamping forms in a dusty Treasury Department cubicle. They have absolutely no concept of the sensitive compartmented information facility where my task force operates. The room hums with the sound of high-powered servers and cooling units. Fluorescent lights reflect off dozens of monitors displaying real-time financial tracking algorithms. I walk straight to the command table in the center of the room. My lead data analyst, Ryan, slides a tablet across the sleek surface the moment I sit down. He does not need to ask how my dinner went. The red alert status of Apex Green on our main monitoring board speaks for itself. We have a massive bleed on the grid, Ryan says, pulling up a complex web of transactional nodes. 30 minutes after Apex Green received the initial deposit from the Department of Energy grant, the funds started moving. They are not buying solar panels or building sustainable infrastructure. I lean forward, my eyes scanning the rapid digital movement across the screens. Connor is arrogant, but he is not working alone. He is using a sophisticated layering technique. Show me the distribution matrix. Ryan taps his keyboard and the screen fractures into dozens of smaller transaction pathways. Connor is funneling the federal capital through a series of decentralized cryptocurrency tumblers. He is trying to wash the money by breaking the $50 million into microtransactions, bouncing them across anonymous blockchain ledgers. From there, the clean crypto is being converted back into fiat currency and routed to offshore corporate accounts. Where is the final destination? I ask, my voice sharp and entirely focused on the hunt. Cyprus and the Cayman Islands. Ryan confirms, pointing to the terminal endpoints on the digital map. The accounts belong to 3 different shell companies holding 0 physical assets. Apex Green is nothing but a digital vacuum cleaner, sucking up taxpayer money and blasting it overseas. The sheer audacity of my brother makes my blood run cold. He is not just skimming off the top of a government contract. He is orchestrating a full-scale robbery of federal funds, and he is doing it while smiling over expensive bourbon and letting our parents mortgage their entire future to back his counterfeit empire. My father is practically handing the bank the deed to his home to finance a ghost operation. Before I can authorize the next phase of the trace, my personal cell phone vibrates violently against the metal desk. I keep a strict boundary between my secure devices and my civilian phone, but the relentless buzzing demands my attention. I pick it up and unlock the screen. It is a barrage of text messages from my mother, Eleanor. She never texts me during work hours unless she needs someone to belittle. I open the chat thread, reading the blocks of text that flood my screen in rapid succession. Natalie, your brother's lawyer needs your social security number and your electronic signature on the consulting agreement by 5 o'clock today. Connor is doing you a massive favor by offering you this position. Do not ruin this with your typical petty jealousy. We expect you to act like a supportive sister for once in your life. I read the words twice, feeling the familiar sting of her manipulation. She frames a federal crime as a generous favor. Connor needs a clean government employee on his payroll to legitimize his fraudulent compliance reports. He wants to use my spotless federal record as a human shield against the exact audit my team is currently executing. My phone vibrates again. Another message from Eleanor pushes its way onto the screen. If you do not send the documents by 5, your father and I are putting your grandfather's house on the market tomorrow morning. Connor needs the liquid capital from that property to secure his overseas expansion. You have been living there practically for free. It is time you stopped being a parasite on this family. Send the signature or start packing your bags. Do not test us, Natalie. We will disown you without a second thought. I stare at the glowing screen. The threat is explicit and brutal. My grandfather left that house to my parents with the strict verbal understanding that it would eventually pass down to me. I pay $3,000 a month in rent to my parents to live their money they gladly pocket while calling me a freeloader. Now they are entirely willing to render their own daughter homeless just to feed Connor's insatiable greed. They are ready to toss me out onto the street to fund a criminal enterprise they completely misunderstand. Ryan notices the shift in my posture. He looks away from his monitors and glances at my phone. "Everything all right, Director?" he asks carefully. I lock the phone and place it face down on the table. My family thinks they have backed me into a corner. They believe the threat of losing my home and being disowned will terrify me into compliance. They expect me to break down, call them crying, and hand over my identity to save my relationship with them. They have absolutely no idea that their golden child is already drowning in quicksand, and they are begging to tie themselves to his ankles. "Everything is perfectly fine, Ryan," I say, my voice steady and devoid of any hesitation. Connor Adams just made a fatal operational error. He is accelerating the cash funnel because he thinks he has a clean compliance officer ready to take the fall. He is getting sloppy. I stand up and walk toward the main tactical display covering the entire front wall of the room. The glowing lines of Connor's illegal transactions spiderweb across the global map. I point directly at the primary offshore routing hub in Cyprus. I want a full freeze on every secondary account connected to this node. I command my tone, leaving zero room for debate. Draft the federal subpoenas for the crypto exchanges he is using to tumble the cash. Flag every single transaction over $10,000 associated with Apex Green or any of its subsidiaries. Ryan nods, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he initiates the protocols. "What about the primary accounts?" he asks. "Do we freeze the 50 million right now?" "No," I reply, watching the numbers tick upward on the screen. "Let him move the money. Let him commit the felony in full view of our tracking software. The moment he transfers the final dollar into the offshore holding company, we trigger the trap. We let him build his own prison." My personal phone vibrates one more time against the metal desk, a final warning from my mother demanding my obedience by 5 o'clock. I do not even bother looking at it. The deadline she set means absolutely nothing. By 5 o'clock today, my mother will not be worrying about my signature or my grandfather's house. She will be worrying about why the federal government just locked down every single asset her precious son claims to own. The countdown has started, and I am the one holding the clock. I close the encrypted laptop and slide it back into my secure briefcase. The drive from the Pentagon to the Alexandria estate takes exactly 42 minutes. This is the house my grandfather built, the house he explicitly meant for me to inherit, but the deed currently remains in my parents' names. For 3 years, I have paid them above market rent to live here, honoring a twisted family arrangement they disguised as a favor. As I pull into the long circular driveway, I see that Connor did not waste a single second executing his threat. My belongings are scattered across the front lawn. It is a perfectly curated display of disrespect. My favorite winter coats hang haphazardly over the rhododendron bushes. Cardboard boxes are stacked unevenly near the sprinkler system, some already tipping over, spilling books and framed photographs onto the damp grass. Two burly men in matching Apex green polo shirts are marching out the front door, carrying my antique oak desk. Richard stands on the sweeping front porch, his arms crossed over his chest, wearing his pristine country club blazer. Eleanor is right beside him, holding a clipboard and tapping her foot with aggressive impatience. I park my car, step out, and walk deliberately up the stone path, ignoring the men hauling my furniture. What is the meaning of this? I ask, my voice completely devoid of the panic they are so desperately hoping to see. My father descends 2 steps, positioning himself to tower over me. He holds out a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy cardstock. "This is your reality check, Natalie," he states, his voice carrying that familiar, booming authority he uses to intimidate boardrooms and daughters alike. "Your brother called us. He told us you threw a childish tantrum in the parking garage and refused to sign the compliance forms for his new federal subsidiary. We warned you. You either act like a supportive member of this family or you find somewhere else to live." Eleanor descends the steps to join him, waving a designer pen in my face. "You have always been an ungrateful child," she scoffs, adjusting her silk scarf. "This family raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. Now your brother is doing massive things. He is working directly with United States senators. He is reshaping the national energy grid. He asks you for one simple signature to expedite his bureaucratic red tape, and you decide to play the victim. You are throwing a tantrum out of pure, unadulterated jealousy because you are stuck at a dead-end desk job while he is making history." I look from the pen in her hand to the scattered boxes on the lawn. "You hired your golden child's corporate thugs to illegally evict a paying tenant without a 30-day notice." I note, keeping my tone analytical and precise. "You do realize this violates basic Virginia housing laws." Richard laughs, a harsh barking sound. "Do not quote lease agreements to me on my own property. We are family, and family protects its own investments. Connor needs the equity tied up in this house to secure a bridge loan for his international expansion. Since you refuse to contribute to the family legacy, we are selling this estate to a developer on Monday, unless, of course, you sign these papers right now." He thrusts the clipboard toward my chest. "Sign the consulting agreement. Give Connor your social security number and I will call the movers off. You can carry your boxes back inside and keep your little subsidized life." I look at the documents on the clipboard. The header reads, "Apex Green Compliance and Verification Audit." The signature line requires me to state under penalty of perjury that I have independently reviewed and verified the operational integrity of their federal grant allocations. It is a one-way ticket to federal prison. Connor knows he is under investigation, and he is trying to set me up as the blind compliance officer who rubber-stamped his fraud. He needs a fall guy. He chose his little sister. I look my father straight in the eye, dropping my professional mask just enough to let my absolute disgust shine through. "He is not working with senators," I say, my voice ringing clear and sharp in the quiet suburban air. "He is stealing taxpayer money. He is running a massive illegal shell game. If I sign that piece of paper, I go to federal prison instead of him." My mother gasps dramatically, stepping back as if I just slapped her. "How dare you!" she shrieks, her face turning an ugly shade of crimson. "How dare you stand on this property and accuse your successful, hardworking brother of being a criminal? You are sick, Natalie. You are deeply mentally unwell. You cannot stand the fact that Connor is a millionaire and you are absolutely nothing." Richard throws the clipboard onto a nearby patio chair, his face contorting with rage. "I am done trying to reason with a hysterical spinster," he snarls, pointing a finger directly at my face. You are cut off. As of this exact second, you are completely dead to me. You are no longer my daughter. Take your garbage off my lawn and never show your face to us again. Connor is building an empire, and I will not let a bitter, mediocre failure drag him down with ridiculous, slanderous lies. You are mortgaging your own future to fund a sinking ship, I reply, stepping closer to my father, refusing to yield a single inch of ground. Apex Green has no infrastructure. They have no solar panels. They have offshore accounts and fake invoices. You are handing the deed of grandfather's house over to pay for a crime. When the authorities come knocking, they will not just take Connor. They will take everything you tied to his name. Get off my property! Richard roars, his composure entirely shattered. He grabs a small box of my books from the grass and hurls it toward the driveway. The cardboard splits open, sending hardcovers skidding across the pavement. I stand perfectly still amid the flying debris and the screaming. My parents are completely unhinged drunk on the illusion of Connor's wealth and desperate to protect their own elevated social status. They have chosen their side, and they have made their bed. I do not feel an ounce of sadness or rejection. I only feel a cold, calculating determination. The family that always treated me as a scapegoat just handed me the moral clearance to execute my job without a shred of guilt. The heavy oak door swings open with a sharp creak that slices right through my father's screaming. The sudden noise cuts through the absolute chaos on the front lawn. It is not one of the moving men coming back for another piece of my furniture. It is Naomi. She stands on the threshold, framed by the warm lighting of the foyer, looking completely flawless in her tailored charcoal suit. But her eyes are entirely cold. As a senior compliance lawyer for a major defense contractor, Naomi makes a living tearing apart corporate lies. She is professionally trained to spot financial discrepancies, illegal loopholes, and corporate liabilities from a mile away. She steps onto the porch, her piercing gaze sweeping over the scattered boxes, my winter coats thrown over the bushes, and finally landing on my father's red, furious face. "Naomi, tell this ungrateful girl to get off our property!" Eleanor demands, rushing over to her daughter-in-law as if seeking immediate backup. She has lost her mind. She is standing right here on our lawn, making up psychotic lies about Connor. She is trying to say his company is stealing federal money. Tell her how ridiculous she sounds. Naomi does not immediately respond. She looks at Eleanor, then at Richard, and finally at me. I can see the gears turning rapidly behind her sharp brown eyes. She heard exactly what I said about Apex Green being an illegal shell game. While my parents heard the envious ravings of a jealous sister, Naomi heard the precise legal terminology of a federal investigator. She recognized the specific phrasing I used regarding wire fraud and tax theft. She knows I am not making this up out of thin air. Instead of defending her husband, Naomi offers a perfectly neutral diplomatic smile to my mother. "Why do you not both go inside and get a glass of water?" Naomi says, her voice smooth and commanding. "You are letting the neighbors see too much of our private family business. People are going to start staring and talking. I will handle Natalie out here. Just go inside and calm down. Connor needs you both to be clear-headed for his expansion plans tomorrow." My parents instantly fall for her strategic manipulation. The mere threat of public embarrassment is enough to make Eleanor gasp and smooth down her silk blouse. "You are right, Naomi," my mother huffs, shooting me one last look of absolute disgust. "She is not worth our blood pressure. Do not let her back in this house." Richard points a shaking finger at me one last time before turning on his heel. He follows his wife inside the heavy oak door, slamming shut behind them, leaving Naomi and me alone on the damp front lawn. The silence stretches heavily between us as I bend down to pick up the scattered books my father had hurled across the driveway. I dust off a hardcover edition of Financial Regulations, a subtle irony given the current situation, and drop it into an open cardboard box. I do not ask Naomi for help, and she does not offer it. We have never been particularly close. My parents always used her success as a weapon against me, constantly comparing my modest civil service salary to her massive corporate law income. I always assumed she enjoyed being the superior daughter-in-law, happily basking in the glowing shadow of my family's golden child. I hoist the heavy box into the trunk of my car and slam the lid shut. I am not angry anymore. I am simply calculating the exact timeline of the federal raid I am about to authorize from my secure terminal. I walk around to the driver's side door, my keys resting in my palm, fully prepared to leave this toxic environment behind forever. Naomi steps off the porch and walks briskly across the lawn, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete driveway. She moves with a specific urgency, checking over her shoulder to make sure the front windows of the house are completely empty. She stops right behind my car, standing close enough that she can speak without raising her voice for anyone else to hear. I expect her to deliver a warning. I expect her to tell me to stay away from her husband and mind my own business. Instead, she reaches into her expensive leather handbag and grips the handle tightly. "Natalie, wait," she says, her voice dropping to a harsh, urgent whisper. I pause with my hand resting firmly on the car door handle. I look at her over the metallic roof of the sedan. "If you came out here to tell me to apologize to my brother, you are wasting your breath, Naomi. You should go back inside and start looking for a very good criminal defense attorney for your husband. He is going to need one very soon." Naomi shakes her head, her perfectly styled hair catching the dim light of the street lamp. She takes another step closer to my car, completely abandoning her usual composed, untouchable facade. "I do not care about defending Connor," she whispers fiercely. "I care about protecting myself and my children from whatever storm he just walked into." I let go of the door handle, giving her my full professional attention. Her eyes are wide, filled with a mixture of terror and absolute calculating rage. Naomi is a woman who fought tooth and nail to build her impeccable reputation in a predominantly white, male-dominated industry. A federal fraud charge attached to her name would instantly vaporize her entire career and destroy her life. "I heard what you said to Richard." Naomi continues, her voice trembling slightly before she forces it back into a steady, controlled rhythm. "You said Connor is running an illegal shell game. You said he is stealing taxpayer money. You would not use those specific legal terms unless you knew exactly what you were talking about. And I know you are telling the truth, Natalie, because I found the banking paperwork in his home office safe last night." She leans in closer, looking me dead in the eye, dropping the final piece of the puzzle right into my hands. "I saw that Connor secretly mortgaged the family mansion, but that is not the worst part. I found a secondary loan application filed under my name. He forged my signature on federal loan documents to secure another $2 million for Apex Green. He is tying my name and my legal credentials to his fraudulent company without my consent. You know exactly what he is doing, do you not?" I stare at her, letting the sheer magnitude of Connor's stupidity sink in. Forging the signature of a senior compliance lawyer on federal loan documents is not just arrogant. It is an act of spectacular self-destruction. Connor has not just crossed a legal line, he has dragged his wife and the mother of his children directly into the blast radius of a federal indictment. Naomi holds my gaze, refusing to blink. Her breathing is shallow but perfectly controlled. She is not reacting like a betrayed spouse mourning a broken marriage. She is reacting like a highly trained legal predator who just realized she is standing on a landmine. "He crossed a line," Naomi states, her voice as cold as ice. "I spent 12 years building an immaculate record in corporate law. I sit on the ethics board of 3 different defense contractors. If the federal government traces fraudulent loans back to an application bearing my forged signature, I lose my license. I lose my career. I could face prison time. I will not let a narcissistic amateur drag me down to save his counterfeit energy empire." She takes a sharp breath, her grip tightening on her leather bag. "I need to know how deep this goes, Natalie. I need to know exactly what kind of federal heat is coming down on him, so I can sever my assets file for sole custody and build an impenetrable legal firewall around my children. You are not just a civil servant at the Treasury. You know exactly what is about to happen." I look past her shoulder. The front windows of the house remain dark, save for the warm glow of the chandelier in the foyer. Richard and Eleanor are likely in the drawing room right now, pouring expensive bourbon and celebrating their victory over the ungrateful daughter. They have absolutely no idea that their perfect daughter-in-law is standing in the driveway actively plotting to dismantle their golden child. I turn back to my car, open the driver's side door, and reach into my secure briefcase. My fingers bypass the encrypted laptop and find the hidden zippered compartment lining the bottom. I pull out a small metallic USB drive. It is completely unmarked, a heavy-duty military-grade storage device that looks entirely innocuous to the untrained eye. I close the car door and step back toward Naomi. I hold the small drive between my fingers, letting the street lamp catch its dull silver surface. I am legally bound by operational protocols, I tell her, keeping my voice incredibly low, matching her tone of absolute secrecy. I cannot give you a verbal briefing. I cannot directly confirm or deny the existence of any active federal investigations regarding Apex Green or its subsidiaries, but I can give you the tools you need to build your firewall. I press the metallic drive into the palm of her hand. Her fingers immediately close around it, hiding it from view. Do not plug that into your home network, I instruct her, my tone shifting into pure tactical command. Do not use your work laptop. Do not use any device connected to a cloud server or a Wi-Fi network. You need to buy a cheap disposable laptop with cash. Air gap it completely. Read the files on this drive offline. Memorize what you need for your divorce and asset separation, and then physically destroy the computer and the drive. Naomi looks down at her closed fist, then back up at me. Her dark eyes are razor sharp, processing the extreme security measures I am demanding. What is on here? She asks, her voice barely a whisper. Everything, I reply simply. Every offshore routing number, every fake subsidiary, every shell company registered in Cyprus and the Cayman Islands. It contains the complete mapping of his fraudulent architecture. I cannot say it directly, Naomi, but protect yourself and the kids. Get your legal separation on record immediately. He is preparing a massive explosion, and he is entirely willing to use you as the collateral damage. Naomi slips her hand into her designer purse, dropping the USB drive deep into a hidden pocket. When she pulls her hand back out, the fierce, terrified woman from a moment ago is entirely gone. In her place stands the immaculate, untouchable corporate attorney. She adjusts the lapels of her charcoal suit, her posture straightening into a flawless display of affluent composure. I will file the emergency injunctions tomorrow morning, Naomi says, her voice regaining its smooth conversational cadence. I will claim financial discrepancies and demand an immediate freeze on all marital assets. By the time he realizes I am dismantling his safety net, it will be too late for him to access a single dime of my money. She pauses, offering me a brief, sharp nod of profound respect. An alliance forged not in friendship, but in mutual survival. Take care of yourself, Natalie, she says quietly. You too, Naomi. She turns on her heel and walks back up the stone path toward the house. I watch her ascend the porch steps with absolute grace. She opens the heavy oak door and steps back into the warm, inviting light of the foyer. She is going back inside to play the supportive wife, to smile at my parents, and to quietly nod while they praise Connor's brilliant business acumen. She will sit at their dinner table, sip their wine, and silently calculate the exact trajectory of the knife she is about to plunge into his back. The heavy door closes, sealing the house and its toxic inhabitants away from the cool night air. I stand alone in the driveway for a long moment, surrounded by my discarded winter coats and scattered cardboard boxes. The visual evidence of my eviction means absolutely nothing now. Richard and Eleanor believe they have thrown me out into the cold, stripped me of my stability, and secured their own financial future. They believe they have won. I walk around to the driver's side door and slide into the leather seat. I start the engine, the low hum of the motor breaking the quiet suburban silence. I put the car in gear and drive slowly down the long circular driveway, leaving my antique oak desk and my broken boxes behind on the wet grass. I do not look in the rearview mirror as I pull out onto the main road. Let them have the house. Let them have the empty pride. By 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, the federal asset freeze will hit. The offshore accounts will be locked, the grand jury subpoenas will be delivered, and Naomi will have already severed her financial ties, leaving Connor completely exposed. The trap is perfectly set, the players are in position, and the countdown to absolute destruction has officially begun. The following morning, I arrive at the Pentagon 2 hours before my usual shift. The sensitive compartmented information facility is already a hive of highly coordinated activity. Analysts are monitoring the live feeds of Apex Green's banking nodes, watching as Connor scrambles to move the last tranches of federal grant money across international borders. The Cyprus accounts are swelling with stolen capital. Every digital footprint is being logged, verified, and attached to the impending grand jury indictment. I pour a cup of black coffee and walk toward the main tactical display, fully prepared to finalize the execution orders for the 5 o'clock raid. Before I can even set my mug down on the command table, Ryan intercepts me. His expression is unusually tight, a stark contrast to his typical analytical calm. He holds a secure tablet in his left hand, the screen glowing with an audio file interface. "Director, we have an unexpected variable," Ryan says, keeping his voice strictly professional, but laced with an underlying current of disbelief. 10 minutes ago, the Treasury Inspector General's secure tip line received an anonymous report. The FBI field office in Richmond received the exact same call 2 minutes later. Both agencies immediately flagged the audio and routed it directly to our task force, because your name is listed as the primary subject of the complaint. I look at him, my coffee forgotten. "Play it," I command. Ryan taps the screen. A digitally altered voice synthesized to sound deep and entirely robotic echoes through the small speaker. "I am a concerned corporate citizen reporting severe misconduct by a federal employee." The voice drones in a monotonous cadence. "Natalie Adams, currently employed by the Department of the Treasury, is actively engaged in corporate espionage and the theft of proprietary data. She is using her government clearance to illegally access the private servers of Apex Green, a federal contractor. She is mentally unstable, highly vindictive, and is attempting to extort the company's executives. She must be suspended immediately and stripped of her security credentials before she compromises federal integrity." The recording clicks off, leaving a heavy silence in the immediate vicinity of our command table. I stand perfectly still, staring at the blank screen of the tablet. The sheer audacity of the move is breathtaking. Connor is not just trying to force me out of our grandfather's house. He is actively trying to destroy my entire career. In his mind, I am nothing but a low-level bureaucratic clerk, a jealous sister who needs to be swatted like a nuisance fly. He firmly believes that an anonymous tip about data theft and mental instability will trigger an immediate internal affairs investigation. He expects my superiors to march into my cubicle, confiscate my badge, seize my hard drives, and march me out of the building in disgrace. He thinks getting me fired will neutralize the threat I pose to his fraudulent empire. He has absolutely no concept of who I actually am, or that the tip line he just called feeds directly into the very task force I command. "Did you trace the origin of the call?" I ask, my voice remarkably steady. Ryan offers a grim, almost predatory smile. "Of course we did. Whoever he hired to make the call used a commercial voice over Internet Protocol service. They bounced the signal through a proxy server in Eastern Europe to mask the IP address. It is a standard evasion tactic for amateur corporate fixers. But the operative made a fatal, spectacular error. They paid for the proxy subscription using an Apex Green corporate credit card." Ryan swipes his finger across the tablet, pulling up a digital receipt. The transaction is fully authenticated. It traces straight back to Connor's executive expense account. He actually used the very funds he is currently stealing from the federal government to finance a smear campaign against a federal director. I lean my hands on the edge of the metal desk, looking up at the glowing web of Connor's impending downfall on the main monitor. My brother is entirely consumed by his own arrogance. He is so used to manipulating our parents, so used to controlling the narrative, that he believes he can manipulate the United States Department of Justice with a clumsy anonymous phone call. He wanted to ensure I was too busy defending my own reputation to look closely at his compliance forms. He wanted me panicked, unemployed, and entirely broken. Instead, he just handed me the final, irrefutable piece of evidence I needed to lock him away for decades. "Add it to the indictment," I instruct Ryan, feeling a cold, genuine smile spread across my face. Under what specific charges? Director Ryan asks, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready to draft the addendum. Title 18. United States Code Section 1001. I state, reciting the statute from memory, making materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements to a federal agency. Add a charge for obstruction of a federal investigation, and cap it off with attempting to interfere with a federal agent operating in an official capacity. Ryan types rapidly, securing the audio file and the financial trace into the permanent evidence vault. He is digging his own grave. Ryan notes, shaking his head at the sheer stupidity of the crime. No, I correct him. Watching the clock on the wall tick steadily toward the afternoon deadline. The grave was already dug. Connor just volunteered to jump in and pull the dirt down over his own head. He thought he was being ruthless. He thought he was executing a flawless, dirty revenge to protect his stolen wealth. He thought he could silence the one person who refused to bow to his golden child status. But every single move he makes only tightens the federal noose around his neck. The anonymous call was his final, desperate act of corporate hubris. He has voluntarily provided the definitive proof of his malicious intent, completely destroying any potential defense that his financial crimes were merely accidental accounting errors. I pick up my coffee mug, feeling entirely energized. Let him think the call worked, I tell my team, my voice projecting across the room. Let him spend the next few hours believing he has won. Keep the blackout protocols active. When the tactical teams breach the Apex Green headquarters at exactly 5 o'clock, I want Connor Adams to be the most surprised man on the face of the earth. Monday afternoon arrives with a suffocating tension that you can practically feel in the air. At exactly 2 o'clock, my secure government cell phone vibrates on my desk at the Pentagon. I do not need to look at the caller ID to know who it is, but the text message flashing across the screen confirms it. It is a formal summons from my father. He demands my presence at the law offices of Sterling and Partners in downtown Alexandria at 3 o'clock sharp. The message is devoid of any familial warmth, stating only that we are finalizing my permanent exit from the family. I smile, locking my terminal and grabbing my coat. The timing is absolutely poetic. The federal raid on Apex Green is scheduled for 5 o'clock. I have exactly 2 hours to kill, and I cannot think of a better place to wait for the explosion than sitting in a room with the very people who lit the fuse. The conference room at Sterling and Partners smells of expensive lemon polish and old money. When I push open the heavy glass doors, the entire family is already seated around a massive mahogany table. Richard sits at the head, looking like a judge preparing to hand down a death sentence. Eleanor sits to his right, her posture rigid, her hands folded tightly over a leather binder. Connor is slouched comfortably in a high-backed leather chair, scrolling through his phone with a look of supreme boredom. He is wearing a custom-tailored suit that costs more than my monthly mortgage, projecting the image of a wildly successful tech CEO. He does not even bother to look up when I enter the room. Naomi sits next to him. She is a masterclass in composure. She wears a navy blue sheath dress and a perfectly neutral expression. But when our eyes meet for a fraction of a second, I see the subtle, razor-sharp acknowledgement. She read the encrypted USB drive. She knows exactly what is coming, and she has already filed her emergency injunctions to freeze her own assets. She is sitting next to a dead man walking, and she is playing the role of the supportive wife flawlessly. Mr. Sterling, an older attorney with thinning white hair and a deeply uncomfortable expression, gestures for me to take the single empty chair at the opposite end of the table. I sit down, resting my hands flat on the polished wood, waiting for the theater to begin. Richard clears his throat, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the table. He looks at me not as a father looking at a daughter, but as a hostile corporate raider looking at a vanquished rival. We are not going to waste time with pleasantries, Natalie. Richard begins, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet room. Your behavior yesterday was the final straw. You have repeatedly demonstrated a complete lack of loyalty to this family. You refused to help your brother when he offered you a highly lucrative position. You threw a childish, jealous tantrum on my front lawn, and you made slanderous, unforgivable accusations against a company that is currently reshaping the national energy sector. I keep my face completely blank. I let him build his momentum. Because of your subversive attitude and your blatant jealousy toward your brother, I am officially cutting you out of my will, Richard announces, delivering the words with brutal, calculated precision. I spent my entire life building a legacy, and I will not allow a bitter, ungrateful child to squander it. The entire $15 million estate, including the Alexandria property you currently occupy, will go exclusively to Connor. He has proven that he knows how to handle capital. He knows how to build an empire. Connor finally looks up from his phone, flashing me a brilliant, condescending smile. It takes vision to build a legacy, Nat, he says, dripping with fake sympathy. You chose to stay stuck in a dead-end government job. You chose to be mediocre. Dad is just making a smart business decision. I am going to double that $15 million in 2 years with the new federal contracts we are securing. I stare at Connor, marveling at his absolute blindness. He is bragging about federal contracts that are currently the subject of a massive grand jury indictment. He is counting millions of dollars that the Department of Justice is about to seize. Eleanor slides a thick, legally binding document across the mahogany table. It stops right in front of me. She places a heavy gold pen on top of the paper. Her eyes are cold and vindictive, completely stripped of any maternal warmth. This is a formal severance agreement, Eleanor states, her voice sharp and trembling with anger. We had Mr. Sterling draft it this morning. It is a comprehensive waiver of all your property rights and any future claims to the family estate. By signing this, you legally agree that you have no financial ties to us, no claim to your grandfather's house, and no right to contest your father's will. She leans forward, pointing a manicured finger at the document. We want it in writing, Natalie. We are forcing you to sign this so you can never leech off this family again. When you finally realize what a massive mistake you made when you are struggling to pay rent on some miserable little apartment, I want it legally established that you cannot come crawling back to ask Connor for a handout. You are on your own. Sign it. I look down at the legal document. I read the bold print at the top. It explicitly severs my financial and legal connection to Richard Adams, Eleanor Adams, and Connor Adams. They think they are punishing me. They think they are leaving me destitute and humiliated. They do not realize that they are literally begging me to sign a legal shield. When the federal raid happens at 5 o'clock, the Department of Justice will initiate a sweeping asset forfeiture protocol. They will freeze every bank account connected to Connor. They will seize the Alexandria estate because Richard illegally pledged it as collateral for a fraudulent federal loan. The government will tear apart the finances of every single person legally tied to the Adams family estate. By demanding I sign this severance agreement, my parents are voluntarily building an impenetrable legal wall between my clean federal record and their impending criminal bankruptcy. They are giving me exactly what I need to survive the blast. Are you absolutely certain about this? I ask, looking directly at my father, giving him one final technical opportunity to back away from the edge of the cliff. Once I sign this, there is no reversing it. My finances will be entirely separated from yours and Connor's. If anything happens to his company or to your estate, I will have no legal obligation to assist you. Richard lets out a booming, dismissive laugh. Assist us, he mocks, shaking his head. Do not flatter yourself, Natalie. We will never need your assistance. Just sign the paper and get out of my sight. I pick up the gold pen. I do not hesitate. I sign my name with smooth, steady strokes on all 3 signature lines, officially executing the severance. I slide the document back across the table to Mr. Sterling, who quickly stamps it with his notary seal. Done, I say quietly, standing up from my chair and buttoning my coat. I check my watch. It is exactly 4:15. Eleanor snatches the document, holding it like a hard-won trophy. Do not expect an invitation to Thanksgiving, she sneers. I look at her, then at Richard, and finally at Connor. Enjoy your $15 million, I say, letting a cold, genuine smile touch my lips for the first time today. I highly recommend you spend it quickly. I turn and walk out of the conference room, leaving them to celebrate their hollow victory. I step into the elevator and press the button for the lobby. My phone vibrates in my pocket before the doors even close. I pull it out, expecting a tactical update from Ryan regarding the strike team's positioning outside Apex Green. Instead, the message is a direct alert from the FBI Cybercrimes Division. It is a priority notification flagging my federal employee identification number. The text is brief, but entirely clear. Director Adams, we have received a high-priority anonymous tip regarding your security clearance. An individual claiming to be an executive at Apex Green has formally accused you of corporate espionage, data theft, and targeted harassment. Internal Affairs has been notified. I read the message twice as the elevator descends. Connor could not just let it go. He was not satisfied with stealing my inheritance and kicking me out of my home. He actively hired a fixer to call the FBI, attempting to frame me for cybercrimes to ensure I lost my federal career as well. He wanted to completely annihilate me. I step out of the elevator into the bustling lobby, a soft, dangerous laugh escaping my throat. Connor thought he was executing a brilliant, untraceable corporate hit. He has no idea that by filing a false report against a federal director actively investigating his company, he just upgraded his impending charges from simple wire fraud to federal retaliation and obstruction of justice. He just handed me the final nail for his coffin, and he gift-wrapped it himself. I am standing in the sunlit lobby of Sterling and Partners, the federal alert still glowing on my secure device. Before I can push through the revolving glass doors and step out into the crisp Alexandria afternoon, the brass elevator chimes behind me. I turn around to see Connor striding out of the cab. His custom-tailored suit suddenly looks a little too tight across his shoulders, and the arrogant, untouchable smirk he wore upstairs in the conference room has completely vanished. He is walking fast, his expensive leather shoes clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. He is chasing after me. He came down here because my reaction upstairs broke his carefully rehearsed script. When Richard summoned this formal family meeting and sat me down across from his high-priced attorney, they expected a spectacular emotional collapse. When my father proudly announced that he was cutting me entirely out of his will due to my supposed jealousy, transferring the entire $15 million estate directly to his golden boy, they wanted me to beg. When Eleanor slid that ruthless severance agreement across the mahogany table, demanding I sign away all my property rights so I could never drain their wealth again, they anticipated a hysterical fight. Instead, I had picked up the gold pen and signed my name with the fluid, unhesitating strokes of a woman who was entirely at peace. I did not shed a single tear. I did not argue. I did not hesitate. Connor catches up to me just as I reach the exit. He grabs my elbow, pulling me back from the revolving doors with a frantic energy. "Wait," he demands, his voice low and incredibly tight. I look down at his hand gripping the sleeve of my trench coat, then slowly up at his face. His eyes are darting, searching my expression for the devastation that should be there, but is not. "You did not even read the stipulations." Connor says, his breathing slightly elevated, completely abandoning his cool tech CEO persona. "Mom handed you a document that completely strips you of your birthright, and you just signed it. You gave up $15 million and the house, and you did not even blink. Why?" I pull my arm out of his grasp with a sharp, deliberate movement. The FBI notification is still burning a hole in my pocket, the digital proof of his anonymous tip safely secured on my federal server. He is trying to figure out why his ultimate punishment felt like a massive tactical error. He expected a broken, weeping sister, but he is staring at a woman who just secured an ironclad legal defense against his impending federal indictment. "Because I know exactly what that document is worth, Connor," I tell him, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I reach into my briefcase and pull out my copy of the notarized severance agreement. I hold it up between us, the crisp white paper catching the bright lobby light. It is a comprehensive waiver severing all my financial and legal connections to Richard Adams, Eleanor Adams, and Connor Adams. To them, it is an instrument of exile. To the Department of Justice, it is a legally binding firewall that proves I have zero involvement in the Apex Green money laundering operation. "You and Mom keep this paper safe," I say, translating the sharp thought in my mind, staring directly into his shifting, anxious eyes. "Tell them to put it in a fireproof safe. Tell them to frame it on the wall. Keep this paper safe. It is the most valuable thing you and our parents have ever given me." Connor takes a physical step back, his brow furrowing deeply. The unease radiates off him in palpable waves. He is a man who deals in leverage and manipulation, and he realizes in real time that he has absolutely no leverage over me right now. He thought the anonymous FBI tip would shatter my career, and he thought the disinheritance would shatter my future. Yet I am standing here holding the document that legally declares I have zero financial connection to his fraudulent empire, and I am looking at him with absolute terrifying pity. "You are bluffing," he mutters, though his voice lacks its usual booming confidence. "You have nothing, Natalie. You are a low-level government worker who is about to get fired, and you just signed away your only safety net. You are going to be bankrupt in 6 months. You are going to be begging us for help." I look at him taking in the expensive watch, the silk tie, the complete illusion of success that is about to evaporate in less than an hour. I do not correct him about the FBI tip. I do not tell him that my security clearance is perfectly intact because his anonymous call was traced directly back to his own corporate credit card. I let him hold on to his desperate delusion for just a little bit longer. "Check your watch, Connor," I say softly, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. "Go back upstairs, have a drink with Dad, celebrate your $15 million inheritance, toast to your brilliant future. But whatever you do, do not leave this building. You are going to want to be sitting down in a comfortable chair when the clock strikes 5. I do not wait for his response. I turn around, push through the heavy glass doors, and step out into the crisp afternoon air. As I walk down the busy Alexandria street toward my waiting car, I do not look back. I know exactly what Connor is doing. He is standing alone in the marble lobby, his heart hammering against his ribs, the sheer weight of his own anxiety finally sinking in. He thought he was the predator setting a brilliant trap, but he just realized he is the prey and the cage doors have already locked shut. I open my car door and slide into the driver's seat, tossing the severance agreement onto the passenger side. It lands next to my secure government tablet. The screen lights up with a tactical notification from Ryan. The FBI and Treasury strike teams are fully assembled outside the Apex Green headquarters, weapons hot warrants secured waiting for my final authorization. I connect my earpiece, start the engine, and press the secure transmission button. The connection crackles to life instantly. Director Adams Ryan says, his voice buzzing through the earpiece with absolute professional readiness. "All strike teams are in position. Target perimeter is secure. We are awaiting your final command." I look at the digital clock on my dashboard. It reads 4:45. My family has exactly 15 minutes left of their perfect, wealthy, untouchable reality. After that, everything they have built on a foundation of lies will be reduced to ash. Hold position. I instruct Ryan, steering my car smoothly into the flow of late afternoon traffic. Maintain radio silence. At exactly 5 o'clock, execute the raid. Freeze every asset, seize every server, and bring the entire fraudulent architecture down to the ground. Copy that, Director. Awaiting 5 o'clock mark. I disconnect the call and drive toward the Pentagon, a profound sense of justice settling over me. My parents wanted to strip me of my inheritance to protect their golden child. Instead, they just gave me the freedom to watch his empire burn without shedding a single tear. While Richard and Eleanor were gleefully speeding toward Alexandria to oversee my eviction, Naomi was standing in the pristine silence of her own kitchen, preparing to dismantle her marriage with clinical precision. She had left the law firm in downtown Alexandria shortly after I did, bypassing the celebratory drinks Connor had suggested. She claimed she needed to pick up the children from their private tutoring sessions. Instead, she drove straight to a crowded electronics store in the suburbs. Following my exact instructions, she paid cash for a cheap, thick plastic laptop. She did not provide a name or an email address for the receipt. Now sitting at the sprawling marble island in her kitchen, she breaks the factory seal on the cardboard box. She powers on the device deliberately, ignoring the network setup prompts, and physically disables the wireless receiver. The house is completely quiet. The children are upstairs watching a movie. Connor is still downtown, basking in his perceived victory. Naomi reaches into her designer handbag, retrieves the military-grade USB drive I handed her the night before, and slides it into the port. The files open instantly. Naomi is a senior compliance officer. She spends her days hunting down financial anomalies in multi-billion-dollar defense contracts. She does not panic when she sees the data. Her eyes simply go flat and cold as she processes the sheer magnitude of Connor's arrogance. The drive contains a perfectly mapped topography of a massive federal crime. She clicks through the folders, her mind categorizing the evidence with ruthless efficiency. The Cayman Island routing numbers, highlighting the exact pathways Connor used to siphon federal grant money away from green energy initiatives and into private offshore holdings. The dummy corporations, a web of entirely fabricated LLCs designed to generate fake invoices and inflate Apex Green's operating costs. The forged loan applications, the most damning files of all. High-resolution scans of federal documents bearing her own forged signature, illegally tying her immaculate legal credentials to his fraudulent enterprise. Her blood turns to ice, followed immediately by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. Connor had not just risked his own freedom, he had actively weaponized her 12 years of flawless legal work to secure his counterfeit empire. He had placed her license, her reputation, and her liberty directly in the crosshairs of the Department of Justice. Naomi does not waste time shedding tears over a dead marriage. She shifts immediately into survival mode. The USB drive provides the digital map, but she knows the federal government will need physical corroborating evidence to cement her status as a cooperative whistleblower rather than a complicit spouse. She leaves the kitchen and walks swiftly down the hall to Connor's private home office. She locks the heavy mahogany door behind her. She moves directly to the built-in bookshelf, pulling a specific row of leather-bound volumes forward to reveal the hidden wall safe. Connor always thought he was incredibly clever, but he used his own birth date as the combination. Naomi punches in the numbers. The heavy steel door clicks open. Inside, she finds exactly what the USB drive promised: stacks of physical ledgers, offshore banking security tokens, and the original copies of the forged loan documents. She pulls her burner phone from her pocket. She activates a secure offline scanner application and begins photographing every single page. She captures the ledgers, the routing numbers, and the fraudulent applications, ensuring every detail is perfectly legible. Once the physical documents are digitized, she places them exactly as she found them, closes the safe, and spins the dial. Returning to the kitchen, Naomi connects the burner phone to the disposable laptop via a physical cable. She transfers the scanned images into a heavily encrypted folder. On the USB drive I gave her, she locates the secure anonymous drop link programmed to route directly to my federal task force server. Using a brief, heavily encrypted cellular hotspot, she uploads the entire cache of data. The progress bar moves steadily across the screen. 50%, 75%, 100%. The files are gone. They are sitting on a secure server at the Pentagon. By providing the physical corroboration of the digital fraud, Naomi has effectively granted the federal government the golden key to Connor's prosecution. She has secured her own immunity by becoming the ultimate inside informant. She disconnects the hotspot immediately. Taking a heavy cast-iron meat tenderizer from the stove, she smashes the cheap laptop into unrecognizable pieces, shattering the screen and pulverizing the hard drive. She sweeps the plastic and metal shards into a trash bag to dispose of later. With her professional firewall established, Naomi moves to execute her personal exit strategy. She opens her secure work laptop and pulls up the documents she had spent the entire previous night drafting. She finalizes her emergency petition for divorce. She attaches a motion for an immediate, absolute freeze on all joint marital assets, citing concrete evidence of financial discrepancies. She drafts an emergency request for a restraining order and sole physical custody of their 2 children, formally citing the impending federal indictment of her husband and the extreme risk of flight. She reviews the documents one final time. Her legal arguments are aggressive, airtight, and completely ruthless. She sends the entire packet to her divorce attorney with a single, highly prioritized instruction: file this the exact second the courthouse doors open tomorrow morning. She closes the laptop and walks upstairs to the master bedroom. She bypasses the walk-in closet filled with Connor's expensive suits and moves straight to her personal wall safe. She packs her grandmother's antique jewelry, the diamond tennis bracelets she purchased with her own bonuses, and $50,000 in legally acquired cash reserves she always kept for emergencies. She shoves everything into a single leather duffel bag. She walks down the carpeted hallway to her children's bedrooms. She wakes her 7-year-old son and her 5-year-old daughter with a gentle, soothing voice. She tells them to grab their favorite toys. She promises them they are going on a fun surprise trip to a luxury hotel downtown with an indoor pool. The children, groggy but excited, quickly change into their clothes. Naomi herds them down the stairs and out into the attached garage. She straps them into their car seats in the back of her SUV. She tosses her duffel bag onto the passenger seat and climbs behind the wheel. She starts the engine. The dashboard display lights up, revealing the digital clock. It is exactly 4:55 in the afternoon. Naomi hits the button to open the garage door. She backs the SUV out onto the smooth concrete driveway and hits the button to close the door again, sealing the massive empty mansion behind her. As she drives down the quiet suburban street, she does not look back at the life she is leaving. She knows exactly what is about to happen. In 5 minutes, the FBI will breach the doors of Apex Green. In 5 minutes, Connor will lose everything. And by the time he realizes he needs his brilliant lawyer wife to save him, she will be entirely unreachable, watching his empire burn from a very safe, very comfortable distance. The fallout from the 5 o'clock raid is swift, brutal, and utterly silent to the outside world for exactly 13 hours. Throughout the night, federal agents dismantle Apex Green piece by piece. Servers are bagged as evidence. Bank accounts are frozen across 3 continents. Connor is detained in a sterile federal holding room, completely stripped of his tailored suit, his phone and his arrogant smirk legally paralyzed by Naomi's perfectly timed disappearance with all of his physical assets. But the true execution does not happen in an interrogation room. It happens at precisely 6 o'clock the next morning, delivered directly to the doorstep of every political and corporate power player in the nation. Dawn breaks over Washington, painting the Potomac River in shades of pale gold. At the exact moment the sun hits the marble pillars of the Capitol, the Washington Post publishes its morning edition. It is not just an article. It is a meticulously detailed, deeply sourced exposé that reads like a financial autopsy. The headline dominates the front page, printed in bold, unforgiving black ink. Apex Green, the billion-dollar federal mirage. The article lays bare every single secret Connor thought he had buried. It outlines the fake green energy initiatives, the dummy corporations, and the Cayman Island routing numbers. It exposes how federal grants were siphoned into private accounts to fund luxury real estate and lavish lifestyles. It is a masterpiece of investigative journalism, fueled by the undeniable hard evidence seamlessly routed through secure federal channels the night before. But the text of the article is not what makes the political elite choke on their morning coffee. It is the photograph featured directly below the headline. It is a candid, high-resolution shot taken outside the Pentagon just days prior. In the center of the frame is Natalie. She is not the quiet, unremarkable government worker her family constantly belittled. She is a vision of absolute, untouchable authority. She is wearing a razor-sharp charcoal gray executive suit, her posture impeccable, her expression a mask of cold, calculating intelligence. She is flanked by 4 heavily armed federal security personnel, a security detail reserved exclusively for top-tier intelligence directors. She is holding a classified briefing dossier, looking directly ahead, projecting the aura of a woman who commands armies and dictates federal policy. The caption beneath the photograph is a death sentence to the Addams family legacy. The anonymous female director of the Federal Cybercrimes Task Force arrives at the Pentagon, having successfully spearheaded the multi-agency takedown of the Apex Green laundering network. 10 miles away inside the Alexandria estate, the morning air is thick with the metallic scent of panic. Richard and Eleanor did not sleep. They spent the entire night pacing the hardwood floors, their frantic phone calls to high-priced defense attorneys going straight to voicemail. The reality of their situation had begun to settle over them like a suffocating blanket. The federal agents had not just raided Connor's office downtown. They had placed a lien on the Alexandria house. The $15 million estate Richard had so proudly promised to his son was officially classified as seized federal evidence. Eleanor sits at the massive kitchen island, her hands trembling so violently she can barely hold her porcelain coffee cup. Her perfectly manicured appearance from the day before is entirely gone. Her hair is unbrushed, her face pale and drawn. She looks like a woman who has just watched her entire universe collapse into a sinkhole. Richard is slumped in the leather armchair in the adjoining living room, a half-empty glass of scotch resting on the side table. He looks broken, muttering disjointed sentences about bank freezes and offshore accounts. Eleanor reaches for her iPad, desperate for any news, any shred of information that might explain the nightmare they are trapped in. Her finger shakes as she opens her news application. The Washington Post homepage loads instantly. She stops breathing. She stares at the screen, her eyes wide, unblinking, locking onto the front page photograph. She sees the sharp suit. She sees the heavily armed guards. She reads the headline, and then she reads the caption. She reads it twice, 3 times. Her mind violently rejects the information, trying to reconcile the image of the powerful, untouchable federal director on the screen with the daughter she threw out of the house just hours ago. A horrifying, suffocating realization crashes over her. Natalie was not a low-level government drone struggling to pay rent. She was the architect of the entire raid. She was the director of the Federal Cybercrimes Task Force. Natalie was the one who authorized the seizure of Apex Green. Natalie was the one who dismantled Connor's empire. Eleanor's mind flashes back to the conference room at Sterling and Partners. She remembers sliding that ruthless severance agreement across the mahogany table. She remembers demanding that Natalie sign away all her legal rights to the family estate. She remembers the absolute serene calm on her daughter's face as she picked up the gold pen. Natalie had not signed that document out of defeat. She had signed it because Eleanor had literally handed her a legally binding shield. By forcing Natalie to sever all financial ties to the family, they had voluntarily completely insulated her from the fallout of their own criminal indictment. They had practically begged her to step out of the blast radius. Natalie had known. She had known every single detail. She sat at that table, listened to their insults, accepted her disinheritance, and let them lock themselves inside a burning building while she held the only key to the exit. Richard, Eleanor whispers, her voice a fragile, broken croak. She cannot tear her eyes away from the photograph of her daughter. Richard, you need to see this. Richard does not answer. He is staring blankly at the wall, lost in his own financial ruin. Eleanor stands up, her legs weak, the iPad clutched tightly in her hands. She walks into the living room, shoving the screen directly into Richard's line of sight. Look at it, she demands, her voice rising in pitch, teetering on the edge of complete hysteria. Look at what you did. Look at who she is. Richard blinks, his bloodshot eyes slowly focusing on the bright screen. He reads the headline. He looks at the photograph of Natalie flanked by federal agents. The glass of scotch slips from his grasp, shattering against the expensive Persian rug, splashing amber liquid across his leather shoes. He does not even flinch. He just stares at the face of the daughter he called a failure, finally understanding that she is the one holding the executioner's axe. Before either of them can speak, the heavy silence of the house is violently shattered. Eleanor's cell phone resting on the kitchen counter begins to ring with a sharp, piercing trill. She jumps, spinning around to look at the device. Before she can take a step toward it, the house landline mounted on the wall joins in, ringing loudly. Then Richard's phone, sitting on the side table next to the shattered glass, lights up and begins to vibrate frantically. The noise is deafening. It is a synchronized chorus of social and financial annihilation. It is the sound of board members demanding answers. It is the sound of society friends calling to sever ties. It is the sound of journalists hunting for a quote from the parents of the biggest corporate fraudster of the decade. Eleanor stands frozen in the center of the living room, surrounded by the relentless, mocking ringing. The perfect, untouchable life she had spent decades building is officially over. The phones keep ringing, refusing to stop demanding she answer for the crimes of her golden child and the absolute devastating triumph of the daughter she threw away. The front door of the Alexandria estate suddenly flies open, slamming violently against the hallway wall with a force that shakes the antique picture frames. Connor practically falls into the foyer. He is completely unrecognizable from the arrogant, untouchable executive who sat in the mahogany conference room just yesterday afternoon. His expensive silk tie is gone. His custom-tailored shirt is unbuttoned at the collar and soaked with sweat. His face is the color of wet ash, completely drained of blood, making him look like a dead man walking. He is gasping for air as if he just sprinted all the way from downtown Washington. "They locked me out!" Connor chokes out, leaning heavily against the doorframe for support. His voice is a frantic, high-pitched wheeze. Every single account, the corporate funds, the Cayman Island trusts, my personal checking accounts, even my damn credit cards are declining. I tried to buy a bottle of water at a gas station and the card was flagged for federal seizure. They took everything. Eleanor slowly lowers her hands from her ears, the relentless ringing of the house phones fading into background noise compared to the sheer panic radiating from her son. She rushes forward, grabbing his arms. "Connor, you need to call your lawyer right now," Eleanor demands, her voice trembling violently. "You need to fix this. Tell them it is a mistake." "I cannot call anyone," Connor shouts, pulling away from her grasp and pacing wildly across the foyer. "The FBI seized my phone. They seized my laptop. They took every server out of the Apex Green building. I had to borrow a prepaid phone from a junior analyst just to call Naomi, but her number is completely disconnected." He stops pacing, looking around the house with wide, terrified eyes. "Where is she? Where is Naomi? I need her to draft an emergency injunction. She is the only one who knows how to untangle the compliance filings. Where is my wife?" Richard finally moves. He stands up from his leather armchair, moving with the slow, stiff rigidity of an old man. He does not offer his son a drink. He does not offer him reassurance. He simply picks up the iPad from the console table and walks toward Connor. "Naomi is not going to help you," Richard says, his voice completely hollow. "Nobody is going to help you. Look at this." Richard shoves the glowing screen directly into Connor's chest. Connor snatches the tablet, his hands shaking so violently he nearly drops it onto the hardwood floor. He stares at the front page of the Washington Post. He reads the bold black headline about the Apex Green money laundering ring. He reads the details about the dummy corporations and the fraudulent federal loans. Then his frantic eyes lock onto the photograph in the center of the screen. He stares at the image of his sister. He sees Natalie wearing a razor-sharp executive suit flanked by heavily armed federal security personnel striding up the steps of the Pentagon. He reads the caption identifying her as the director of the Federal Cybercrimes Task Force. He reads the words stating that she personally spearheaded the multi-agency takedown of his entire company. The iPad slips from his fingers and crashes onto the floor, the screen cracking instantly. Connor stumbles backward until his shoulders hit the wall. He slides down the expensive wallpaper, landing hard on the floor, pulling his knees to his chest. He is hyperventilating. The memory of yesterday afternoon crashes over him with devastating clarity. He remembers bragging about his brilliant future. He remembers mocking her for being a mediocre government worker. He remembers her sitting perfectly still, picking up that gold pen and signing the severance agreement without a single moment of hesitation. "She told me to keep the papers safe," Connor whispers, his voice cracking, staring blindly at the cracked tablet on the floor. "She told me the severance agreement was the most valuable thing you ever gave her. She knew the raid was coming. She needed us to legally disown her so the Department of Justice would not freeze her assets along with ours. We gave her a federal shield." He buries his face in his hands, pulling desperately at his hair. And Naomi. Naomi had the access codes to the physical safe. Naomi was the only other person who knew about the Cayman routing numbers. That is why her phone is disconnected. She took the kids and she ran. She gave Natalie the ledgers. They played me. They completely destroyed me. Richard stares at his son, watching his golden boy crumble into a pathetic, weeping mess on the floor. The reality of the situation is absolute, but Richard's ego simply refuses to accept it. He has spent his entire life bullying, manipulating, and buying his way out of consequences. He looks at the photograph of his daughter on the shattered screen, and his mind makes a terrifying, desperate pivot. Natalie is not his enemy. Natalie is his salvation. She is the director of the task force. She has the power to stop this. She is his daughter, and she owes him obedience. Get up! Richard barks, kicking the toe of Connor's expensive leather shoe. Stop crying on the floor like a child. This is just family drama spilling over into the professional realm. Your sister is throwing a tantrum because she felt left out of the inheritance. I can fix this. I am her father. She will listen to me. Eleanor looks at her husband as if he has lost his mind. Richard. She is a federal director. She brought the FBI to our doorstep. She is not going to listen to you. Watch me. Richard snaps, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. He dials Natalie's number. The room falls completely silent, the only sound the persistent ringing of the incoming call. He expects it to go to voicemail. He expects her to hide. But on the third ring, the line clicks open. Director Adams speaking. Natalie's voice echoes through the speakerphone. Her tone is brisk, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. It is the voice of a woman managing a crisis, not a daughter answering a call from her father. Richard immediately shifts his posture, throwing his shoulders back, attempting to project his usual commanding authority. He forces a booming, patronizing chuckle. Natalie, sweetheart. Richard begins his tone a sickening mixture of command and forced flattery. It is your father. Listen, we just saw the morning papers. I have to say, I am absolutely astounded. You work at the Pentagon. You are running a federal task force. Why on earth did you hide this from the family? We would have been so incredibly proud of you. There is a brief silence on the line. When Natalie speaks, her voice could cut through solid steel. Do not call me sweetheart, Richard, and I did not hide anything. I simply chose not to share my federal security clearance with a family of corporate criminals. State your business. I have a press briefing in exactly 10 minutes. Richard swallows hard, his fake smile dropping. He realizes he cannot bully his way through this conversation, so he immediately pivots to desperate pleading. Natalie, please, you have to call off your agents. Richard begs, his voice cracking, shedding every ounce of his pride. This is a massive misunderstanding. Connor got in over his head with some bad investors, but he is a good boy. He is your brother. You know he would never intentionally commit fraud. You have to help him. You have the power to stop this investigation. We can fix this quietly as a family. I am afraid you are deeply confused about my position, Natalie replies, her tone perfectly conversational and utterly lethal. I do not fix white-collar crime. I prosecute it. Connor is not misunderstood. He is a textbook money launderer who decided to steal federal grants. The evidence is immaculate, largely thanks to his wife, who had the excellent sense to provide my team with every single physical ledger before she filed for emergency sole custody this morning. Connor lets out a strangled, agonizing sob from the floor. Richard grips the phone, his knuckles turning white. Natalie, you cannot do this to us. You are destroying your own blood. We are your family. If Connor goes down, they are going to take this house. They are going to take my retirement accounts. You have to protect us. Protect you, Natalie asks, allowing a sharp, chilling laugh to echo through the speaker. I have absolutely no legal obligation to protect you. In fact, I have a notarized, legally binding severance agreement drafted by your own attorney that explicitly states I have zero financial or personal ties to the Adams estate. You demanded I sign it, remember? You wanted to make sure I could never ask you for a handout. She pauses, letting the absolute finality of her words sink in. I suggest you find a very good defense attorney, Richard. You are going to need one. The line clicks dead. Richard lowers the phone slowly, his hand trembling. He looks at Eleanor, who is silently weeping by the console table, and then down at Connor, who is curled into a tight ball on the floor. The Alexandria house, once a monument to their wealth and power, suddenly feels like a very large, very expensive tomb. Richard refuses to accept the silence. His thumb smashes the redial button with frantic, heavy strikes. He hears the automated federal switchboard operator engage again, and this time he abandons all pretense of dignity. He screams into the receiver, lying with the effortless ease of a desperate man, claiming his wife is having a massive cardiac arrest and needs to speak to her daughter before she loses consciousness. The deception works just long enough to bypass the automated screening. 200 miles away, Natalie is walking briskly down the colonnade of the West Wing. Her heels click sharply against the polished stone. Two Secret Service agents walk 2 paces behind her. An aide hurries to her side, holding out a highly encrypted mobile device. The aide whispers the emergency claim. Natalie does not break her stride. She takes the device, her face hardening into a mask of pure glacial focus. She stops just outside the heavy oak doors of the Oval Office. She lifts the phone to her ear. Natalie, thank God, Richard gasps, his voice echoing through the secure line. You have to listen to me. I will give you whatever you want. I will tear up that disinheritance paper right now. We can make you a full partner in the estate. Just pull the agents back. Natalie looks at the presidential seal carved into the wood directly in front of her. She does not feel an ounce of pity. She feels only the absolute, undeniable clarity of total victory. You do not have a single thing I want, Richard, Natalie replies, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet volume. You spent my entire life telling everyone who would listen that my career was a pathetic waste of time. You called my department a bureaucratic dead end. You called my life's work garbage. Richard tries to interject, but Natalie cuts him off with surgical precision. Well, I am currently standing outside the Oval Office preparing to brief the President of the United States on exactly how my task force is cleaning up your garbage. And as for your generous offer to tear up my disinheritance, do not bother. That legal document you and Eleanor forced me to sign is airtight. It explicitly isolates me from your toxic assets. That piece of paper is currently shielding me from the federal indictments my team is drafting for your entire board of directors. It is legally binding, and it will remain exactly where it belongs in my pristine, highly secured personnel file. Please, Natalie. Richard begs, his voice cracking into a pathetic whimper. He is your brother. He is a domestic terrorist who financed his sports cars with stolen taxpayer money, she responds instantly. Have a lovely morning, Richard. Do not ever call this number again. She ends the call, hands the device back to her aide, and steps through the doors of the Oval Office to finish the job. Back in Alexandria, the dial tone blares through the speakerphone. Richard lowers his hands, his face completely devoid of color. The silence that follows is suffocating, broken only by the sound of Connor dragging himself up from the floor. Connor is no longer weeping. The paralyzing shock has entirely burned away, replaced by a feral, cornered animal panic. His eyes dart around the luxurious foyer, mapping the exits, calculating his survival. He realizes the federal net is closing. The raid on his downtown office was just phase 1. Phase 2 is coming for his physical person, and it is coming fast. Get up! Connor suddenly screams, his voice tearing through the quiet house. He lunges at his father, grabbing the lapels of Richard's expensive smoking jacket and shaking him violently. Do not just sit there. They are coming for me. If Natalie is briefing the White House, they already have the arrest warrant signed. I have hours, maybe minutes. Connor, let go of your father. Eleanor shrieks, rushing forward to pry her son's white-knuckled hands away from Richard's chest. Connor shoves her back effortlessly. He is completely unhinged. The manicured executive facade has vanished, revealing the desperate, ruthless coward underneath. He turns his wild gaze onto his parents, his breathing ragged and shallow. I need cash, Connor demands, spit flying from his lips. Every single account with my name on it is frozen. Naomi drained the emergency reserves. I have nothing. I need a plane ticket and I need untraceable money right now. Richard stares at him, stunned by the sheer velocity of his son's breakdown. Connor, you cannot run. If you run, you become a federal fugitive. You have to stay and fight this in court. We will hire the best defense team in the country. With what money? Connor roars, kicking the antique console table so hard the wood splinters. They placed a federal lien on your assets, too. Did you not hear her? Natalie is freezing everything tied to Apex Green, and you are listed as an initial investor. Your bank accounts are dead. The stock portfolios are dead. Connor begins tearing through the drawers of the entryway table, tossing mail keys and expensive pens onto the floor in a frantic search. He rounds on his parents again, his eyes dark and frantic. Call the private wealth managers, Connor orders, pointing a shaking finger at Richard. Tell them you are leveraging this house. Tell them you need an emergency line of credit against the estate payable immediately in offshore wire transfers. Richard shakes his head, backing away from his son. Connor, it is a Saturday morning. I cannot mortgage a $15 million estate in 30 minutes. The banks will not approve an unverified wire transfer of that magnitude, especially not with a federal raid currently leading the morning news. Then find a private lender. Connor screams, his voice cracking in absolute desperation. Call the loan sharks you used back in the 90s. Call your old casino contacts. I do not care what interest rate they demand. Put a second mortgage on this house right now. Eleanor presses her hands over her mouth, backing away toward the kitchen. Her perfect son is demanding they surrender the very roof over their heads, willing to leave them completely destitute just to buy his own freedom. I need $200,000 in cash by noon, Connor dictates, stepping closer to his father, physically backing Richard into the wall. I can hire a private charter out of a regional airfield in Virginia. I can get to the Canadian border before the FAA grounds my passport. But I need the money. Go to the wall safe in your study. Give me your gold watches. Give me the emergency cash reserves. He turns his frantic gaze toward his mother. He lunges across the room, grabbing Eleanor by the wrist. He stares directly at the massive, flawless diamond ring on her finger. Take it off. Connor snarls, his grip tightening painfully around her delicate wrist. Connor, you are hurting me. Eleanor whimpers, trying to pull away, staring at him as if he has morphed into a monster. Take it off! He roars directly into her face. Give me the ring. Give me the necklaces. Give me everything in your jewelry box. I can pawn them at a private dealer in Maryland. I am not going to federal prison because my sister decided to play righteous government crusader. You built this for me. You promised me this empire. Now pay for it. He yanks the diamond ring violently from her finger. Eleanor cries out in pain, stumbling backward against the marble island. She watches her golden child sprint down the hallway toward his father's study, ready to strip the house down to the copper wiring just to save his own skin. The empire has fallen, and Connor is willing to burn his parents alive in the wreckage. Connor bursts into his father's study, his chest heaving as he tears through the immaculate room. He ignores the leather-bound volumes and antique globes, dropping to his knees before the heavy steel wall safe hidden behind the mahogany desk. His fingers slip frantically against the cold metal dial. He punches in his birth date, the combination he has known for years, praying the emergency cash reserves and offshore security tokens are still untouched. The heavy mechanism clicks. Connor throws the door open. The stacks of physical ledgers are still there, sitting exactly where he left them. But the velvet pouch containing $50,000 in bearer bonds and untraceable currency is gone. The compartment holding his secondary passport is empty. Panic, sharp and suffocating, seizes him by the throat. He scrambles backward, his back hitting the leg of his father's desk. He grabs the prepaid burner phone from his pocket, his thumb smashing the keypad as he dials the only person who can navigate this labyrinth. He needs Naomi. He needs her legal brilliance, her pristine reputation, and whatever cash she can withdraw before the feds completely lock down her personal accounts. She is a senior compliance officer. She knows how to move money through shadow channels. She just needs to answer the phone. The line rings once, twice. Naomi, listen to me. Connor gasps the second the call connects, not waiting for a greeting. The feds hit Apex Green. Natalie set me up. I need you to wire the remaining balance from the joint checking into the Cayman holding account right now. Grab the kids and meet me at the private airstrip in Loudoun County. We have to go. There is a brief clinical pause on the other end of the line. This is Robert Vance, senior partner at Sterling Family Law. A crisp, unbothered male voice replies. I am speaking on behalf of my client Naomi Adams. I am formally notifying you that as of 8 o'clock this morning, my client has filed an emergency ex parte petition for absolute divorce. Connor stops breathing. The air in the study suddenly feels thick and freezing cold. Put my wife on the phone, he snarls, his voice dropping to a dangerous shaking register. Your wife is currently under federal whistleblower protection and is entirely unreachable. The attorney continues, his tone radiating supreme legal authority. Furthermore, a federal judge has granted an emergency injunction immediately freezing all joint marital assets. You have exactly zero access to any shared funds, properties, or credit lines. You are also served with an emergency restraining order. You are legally forbidden from coming within 500 feet of my client or your two children. She cannot do this, Connor screams, slamming his fist against the hardwood floor. Half of that money is mine. She is my wife. She was your shield. The attorney corrects him smoothly. And you made a catastrophic miscalculation when you decided to forge her signature on those federal green energy loan applications. Did you truly believe a senior financial compliance officer would just quietly go down with your sinking ship? Naomi digitized every single physical ledger in your wall safe yesterday afternoon. She handed the Department of Justice irrefutable high-resolution proof of your forgery. She successfully secured her own absolute immunity by handing the federal government your head on a silver platter. Connor's vision goes dark at the edges. His heart hammers against his ribs like a trapped bird. The realization crashes into him with the force of a freight train. The quiet, obedient wife who smiled politely at his parents' dinner parties. The woman who let him manage the finances and dictate their social schedule. She had not been submissive. She had been observing him, cataloging his arrogance and waiting for the exact right moment to sever his throat. Naomi has the kids, Connor whispers, his voice devoid of all remaining strength. Naomi has sole physical and legal custody, the attorney confirms. And given that you are currently facing a multi-count federal indictment that carries a minimum sentence of 30 years in federal prison, I strongly suggest you direct your remaining energy toward finding a criminal defense lawyer who accepts collect calls. Do not attempt to contact this number again. The line goes dead. Connor remains on the floor of the study, the burner phone slipping from his loose grip. He is completely stripped bare. Natalie took his empire. Naomi took his money, his children, and his freedom. He is trapped in a burning building, and the two women he spent his entire life underestimating have bolted the doors from the outside. Slowly, like a man walking to his own execution, Connor drags himself up from the floor. He stumbles out of the study and walks back down the long, carpeted hallway. In the kitchen, Eleanor is standing by the marble sink, running cold water over the wrist Connor bruised just minutes prior. Richard is staring out the large bay windows at the manicured lawn, his posture rigid with shock. They both turn as Connor enters. He looks completely hollowed out, a ghost haunting his own life. Where is the money? Richard demands, his voice tight with desperation. Did you get the bearer bonds? We can still hire someone. We can still fight this. They are gone. Connor says, his voice a flat, dead monotone. Naomi took them. She took everything. Eleanor turns off the faucet. She looks at her son, her eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean she took everything? Call her Connor. Tell her to bring the children here. We need to present a united family front for the press. She is a lawyer, she knows how to handle these scandals. She is not going to handle anything. Connor laughs, a broken, hysterical sound that bounces off the vaulted ceilings. She filed for divorce at 8 o'clock this morning. She froze all our joint accounts. She took the kids and went into federal protection. Eleanor takes a step back, shaking her head. No, Naomi would never do that. She is a good girl. She understands family loyalty. She knows her place. Her place is testifying against me in a federal courtroom. Connor shouts, the last remnants of his sanity fracturing. She found the forged loan documents, Mother. The ones I signed her name on to get the federal grants. She digitized the ledgers from the safe and handed them directly to Natalie's task force. She set the trap, and she walked away without a single scratch. The words hang in the air, heavy and lethal. Eleanor's mind violently attempts to process the sequence of events. Her perfect, compliant daughter-in-law. The woman she had meticulously molded into the ideal society wife. the woman she had constantly criticized for focusing too much on her career instead of supporting Connor. Naomi had not panicked. She had not cried. She had clinically and ruthlessly orchestrated Connor's final destruction, securing her own escape pod while chaining her husband to the steering wheel of a crashing plane. Eleanor looks at the shattered iPad still resting on the living room floor, displaying Natalie's commanding face. She looks at her golden son trembling and bankrupt in the kitchen. She realizes with absolute terrifying clarity that they have been completely outmaneuvered by the very women they treated as disposable accessories. The shock is too profound for Eleanor's carefully constructed reality to bear. The room begins to spin rapidly. The pristine white cabinets and the gleaming marble island blur together into a nauseating swirl of light and shadow. She tries to take a breath, but her lungs refuse to expand. A sharp, agonizing pressure clamps down on her chest. Eleanor, Richard asks, stepping forward, finally noticing the terrifying shade of gray spreading across his wife's face. She does not answer. Her knees buckle instantly. She collapses like a marionette with severed strings hitting the polished hardwood floor with a heavy, sickening thud. The matriarch of the Addams family lies motionless among the ruins of her immaculate kingdom, completely broken by the agonizing realization that the obedient women she tried to control are the ones who ultimately buried her. Richard scrambles across the polished hardwood, his hands trembling as he grabs Eleanor by the shoulders, shaking her limp form. He shouts her name, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the kitchen, but the sound is quickly drowned out by a new terrifying noise outside. Heavy tires crunch aggressively against the pristine gravel of the circular driveway. Multiple car doors slam in rapid synchronized succession. Connor freezes. He abandons his frantic pacing and stares through the bay windows. 3 black tactical SUVs are parked diagonally across the front lawn, tearing up the immaculate landscaping. Before Richard can even pull Eleanor into a sitting position, the heavy custom oak doors of the Alexandria estate do not simply open. They are forcefully breached. The heavy thud of tactical boots echoes through the grand foyer, vibrating up the sweeping mahogany staircase. Natalie steps over the threshold of her childhood home. She is entirely unrecognizable from the quiet, accommodating daughter who used to sit silently at the far end of the dining table. She wears a razor-sharp black executive suit that commands absolute authority. Her posture is immaculate, her expression a mask of pure glacial focus. A silver federal badge is clipped prominently to her lapel, catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. She does not walk in alone. 6 federal agents clad in dark FBI windbreakers flank her, fanning out instantly with practiced lethal efficiency. They move past the imported artwork and the priceless antiques, treating the monument to the Addams family wealth like exactly what it is, an active federal crime scene. "Secure all exits!" Natalie orders, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative, completely devoid of any familial warmth. "Confiscate all electronic devices, secure the wall safe in the primary study, and locate the primary suspect." Connor hears the order from the kitchen. The paralyzing shock shatters, replaced by a feral, blinding panic. He locks eyes with his sister through the wide archway. He sees the federal agents moving toward him. The ultimate golden boy, the untouchable executive who spent his entire life mocking her existence, suddenly realizes that his quiet sister is his executioner. He turns and runs. He abandons his mother groaning on the floor. He abandons his father shouting his name. Connor sprints blindly across the gourmet kitchen, his expensive leather shoes sliding wildly on the imported tile. He lunges for the heavy glass French doors leading to the rear terrace and the sprawling gardens beyond, his mind consumed by a desperate, irrational need to escape into the tree line. He slams his body against the push bar, throwing the doors open. He makes it exactly 1 step onto the patio before he crashes chest first into a massive wall of solid muscle. A federal tactical agent already positioned at the rear exit absorbs the impact effortlessly. The agent grabs Connor by the collar of his ruined custom shirt, spinning him around with terrifying force. Connor is thrown face down onto the cold stone pavers of his own patio. "Get off me!" Connor screams, thrashing wildly, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic shriek. "I have money. I have lawyers. You do not know who you are touching." The sharp metallic zip of plastic restraints clicking tightly around Connor's wrists is the only answer he receives. The agent hauls the weeping, humiliated executive to his feet, marching him roughly back into the center of the kitchen. Richard manages to pull Eleanor up from the floor. She leans heavily against the marble island, her face an ashen mask of terror. They watch as their brilliant, flawless son is paraded before them like a common street criminal, his face smeared with dirt from the patio, sobbing uncontrollably. Then they look at Natalie. She stands perfectly still in the center of the room, watching her brother's breakdown with clinical, absolute detachment. The power dynamic of the Addams family has not just shifted, it has been entirely obliterated. Richard tries to summon his usual booming, authoritative voice, the voice he has used to bully subordinates and intimidate competitors for 3 decades. He straightens his spine, puffing out his chest. "Natalie, call your dogs off right this instant," Richard commands, though his voice wavers noticeably. "This is a severe overreach of federal authority. You are making a terrible mistake, and I will personally see to it that your department is sued into oblivion." Natalie does not even blink. She turns her cold gaze from her weeping brother to her father. "You cannot afford to sue a parking attendant, Richard. Every cent of your wealth is currently seized under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. You are bankrupt." Eleanor sees that Richard's aggression is completely useless. She realizes that intimidation will not save them. Her mind frantically pivots back to the only strategy she has left. She attempts to deploy the emotional manipulation that has worked flawlessly for her entire life. She pushes away from the marble island, her eyes welling with massive theatrical tears. She stumbles forward, holding her arms out wide, aiming to pull her daughter into a desperate, motherly embrace. "Natalie, my sweet girl!" Eleanor wails, her voice trembling with manufactured heartbreak. "Please look at what you are doing. You cannot do this to us. You cannot do this to your own family. We are your blood. Connor is your flesh and blood. You grew up together." Natalie takes a smooth, deliberate step backward, completely avoiding her mother's touch. Before Eleanor can close the distance, one of the FBI agents steps smoothly between them, holding up a firm, warning hand. Eleanor recoils as if she has been physically struck, staring at her daughter in absolute horror. "Do not presume to touch a federal officer during an active raid," Natalie says, her tone perfectly conversational and utterly lethal. "And do not dare invoke the concept of family to me. Family does not forge their wife's signature to steal millions in federal grants. Family does not utilize shell corporations to launder dirty money. And family certainly does not force their daughter to sign a legally binding severance agreement just to protect their illicit wealth." Eleanor sobs loudly, covering her face with her hands. "Please, Natalie, we were wrong. I will do anything. I will get down on my knees right now. I told you on the phone to brew the good tea," Natalie replies, her eyes sweeping over the immaculate, silent kitchen. "But I see you have failed at that simple task as well. You always were terribly disappointing when it came to following instructions." Natalie turns to the lead agent standing next to her weeping brother. "Read him his charges and transport him to the holding facility downtown." "No," Connor screams, struggling uselessly against the agent's iron grip. "Mom, Dad, do not let them take me. Call someone, fix this." "Nobody is going to fix this, Connor," Natalie says, watching him being dragged toward the front doors. "Your wife handed us the ledgers. The money is gone. The empire is dead. Enjoy your new accommodations." As Connor's hysterical screams fade into the distance, Natalie turns her attention back to her stunned, shattered parents. She reaches into her tailored jacket pocket, pulls out 2 crisp, white federal subpoenas, and drops them casually onto the marble island. "You are both ordered to appear before a federal grand jury on Monday morning," Natalie states, smoothing the lapels of her suit. "I strongly suggest you spend the weekend finding a public defender. You are going to need one." Without waiting for a response, the director of the Federal Cybercrimes Task Force turns on her heel and walks out the front door, leaving her parents standing entirely alone in the suffocating silence of their ruined estate. As Natalie's hand closes around the heavy brass handle of the front door, a violent scuffle erupts behind her. Connor is not going quietly to his ruin. He digs his expensive leather heels deep into the antique Persian rug in the foyer, violently twisting his shoulders against the iron grip of the two federal agents. His face is a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. "You think you won!" Connor screams, his voice tearing through the cavernous space and echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "You think you can just lock me up and walk away clean? If I go down, Natalie, I am taking them with me." Natalie pauses. She does not turn around immediately. She lets his desperation hang in the air, thick and pathetic. Connor spits blood onto the polished marble, his chest heaving as he fights the plastic restraints cutting into his wrists. "You think the feds are just going to take my corporate accounts? I needed liquid capital 3 months ago. I secretly leveraged this entire estate. I took out a massive secondary mortgage using dirty shell company funds. Every single dime of the Addams family wealth is permanently tied to my offshore cartel accounts. If your task force seizes my assets, they seize this house. They seize Dad's retirement funds. They seize Mom's offshore trusts." Richard lets out a strangled gasp, clutching his chest, as if he has been physically shot. He stumbles backward, his legs giving out as he hits the console table. Eleanor collapses against the hallway wall, her eyes wide with unimaginable horror. The golden boy, the son they had worshipped, funded, and protected, had deliberately used them as a human shield. He had secretly mortgaged their lives to cover his own criminal tracks. "You hear me?" Connor roars, a psychotic, breathless grin spreading across his bruised face. "You arrest me, and the Department of Justice seizes everything they own. Mom and Dad will be out on the street by Monday morning. They will be indicted as co-conspirators in a federal money laundering scheme. You are going to put your own parents in a federal penitentiary. Call off the agents right now, or you destroy your own blood." The room falls dead silent. The agents holding Connor pause, looking toward their director, waiting for her command. Richard and Eleanor stare at Natalie's back, their eyes silently pleading. For a fraction of a second, they actually believe Connor's malicious trap will work. They believe Natalie's conscience will force her to halt the raid to save her parents from total destruction. Natalie slowly releases the door handle. She turns around. Her expression is not one of shock. She is not horrified. She is smiling. It is a slow, razor-sharp smile that radiates pure, lethal satisfaction. She walks with measured, deliberate steps back into the center of the foyer. The sharp clicking of her heels sounds like the ticking of a metronome counting down the final seconds of the Addams dynasty. She stops directly in front of her brother, looking at him as if he is nothing more than a stain on the floor. She reaches into the interior pocket of her tailored blazer. She does not pull out a weapon or a radio. She pulls out a single folded sheet of thick legal paper. With a quick, dismissive flick of her wrist, she tosses it onto the marble console table. It lands right next to a framed family photograph that does not include her. "Look closely at that document," Natalie commands, her voice ringing with absolute chilling clarity. "That is the irrevocable severance agreement your high-priced corporate lawyers drafted yesterday afternoon. The one Mom and Dad aggressively forced me to sign in the conference room. The one explicitly renouncing my right to a single penny of the Addams family inheritance." Connor stares at the paper, his manic grin faltering. Richard and Eleanor look at the document as if it is a venomous snake, a sudden realization beginning to dawn on them. "Do you know how the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act works?" "Connor," Natalie asks, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a conversational, deadly whisper. "The RICO Act is a beautiful piece of legislation. It allows the federal government to seize any asset even tangentially connected to a criminal enterprise. It routinely freezes the accounts of spouses, parents, and siblings. If I were still legally tied to this family, the Department of Justice would have flagged me the second this investigation opened. I would have been heavily investigated. I would have instantly lost my high-level security clearance. I would have been stripped of my directorship. I would have gone down right alongside you." She pauses, letting the absolute genius of the situation sink deeply into their panicked minds. "But Mom and Dad were just so terrified that I might ask for a handout." She continues, her eyes locking onto her horrified parents. "They were so consumed by their own arrogance, so determined to leave their entire corrupt empire solely to you, that they legally disowned me. By forcing me to sign that document yesterday, they permanently severed all my financial and legal ties to your dirty money. Connor's knees buckle. The agents have to physically haul him up by his armpits to keep him from hitting the floor. You did not trap me, Connor, Natalie says, delivering the final crushing blow. You isolated me. That piece of paper is the most impenetrable legal shield I could have ever asked for. Your cruelty, your arrogance, and your boundless greed created the exact armor I needed to stand here today, as the federal director prosecuting your crimes. You dug your own grave and you handed me the shovel. Connor lets out a sound that is barely human, a guttural wail of absolute defeat. The realization that his parents' malicious attempt to punish Natalie is the exact thing that enabled her to destroy him completely breaks his mind. He thrashes weakly, but there is no fight left in him. Get him out of my sight, Natalie orders, her voice cracking like a whip. The federal agents violently shove Connor forward, dragging him out the door and down the front steps toward the waiting tactical vehicles. His frantic sobbing cries fade into the cool morning air, permanently silenced by the slamming of a heavy steel door. Natalie turns her gaze to her parents one last time. Richard is slumped against the wall, clutching his chest, staring blankly at the disinheritance document on the table. Eleanor is weeping silently on the floor, rocking back and forth, mourning the complete evaporation of her wealth, her status, and her favored son. They have nothing left, no money, no empire, no family. They traded everything for a golden child who sold them out for quick cash, and they threw away the daughter who had the power to save them. Natalie adjusts the cuffs of her suit jacket, her posture immaculate. She does not offer them a single word of comfort. She does not look back as she walks out the front door, leaving the wreckage of the Addams family behind her forever. The heavy custom oak door clicks shut behind her, cutting off the echoing silence of the foyer. The crisp morning air hits Natalie's face, carrying the sharp scent of crushed pine needles and exhaust from the tactical vehicles idling on the manicured lawn. She descends the sweeping stone steps of the Alexandria estate, her posture rigid, her breathing steady. She has spent her entire life trying to shrink herself to fit into this massive house. Now she owns the ground she walks on. To her left, Connor is pressed hard against the reinforced steel door of a black SUV. Special Agent Miller steps firmly into his line of sight, holding a leather-bound folio. Connor is no longer shouting. The reality of a federal holding cell has completely drained the arrogance from his veins. He is trembling, his expensive custom shirt torn at the shoulder from his brief, pathetic scuffle. Connor Adams Miller states, his voice projecting clearly across the sprawling driveway. You are under arrest for multiple counts of federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and international money laundering. You are further charged with violating the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act by utilizing a network of shell corporations to conceal illicit funds. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Connor closes his eyes. A ragged, wet sob escapes his throat. He nods weakly as the agents aggressively pat him down, confiscating his platinum watch and his diamond cufflinks, throwing them into a plastic evidence bag. The ultimate golden child is being systematically stripped of his armor, reduced to a suspect identification number. Before the agents can secure Connor in the back seat, a sudden violent commotion erupts from the front entrance of the estate. The heavy doors fly open again, slamming against the brick facade. Richard Adams is forcefully marched out onto the portico. He is flanked by two towering federal agents, his hands secured tightly behind his back in heavy plastic zip ties. The patriarch of the family, the man who spent 4 decades terrifying corporate rivals and belittling his own daughter, looks completely disoriented. His face is purple with rage and exertion, his silver hair wildly disheveled. Take your hands off me, Richard bellows, spitting the words at the agents, reverting to the only tactic he knows. I demand my phone. I demand to call my legal team. You have no jurisdiction to detain me on my own property. You are not being detained, Richard, a senior agent replies, pulling a folded document from his tactical vest. You are under arrest. You are charged with accessory to federal fraud, deliberate concealment of illicit assets, and obstruction of justice. We have the signed deeds to the offshore properties you attempted to transfer into your wife's name yesterday afternoon. We have the encrypted emails you sent to your accountants ordering them to shred the secondary ledgers. Your corporate legal team is currently being raided by a separate task force across town. They cannot help you. Richard's booming voice instantly dies in his throat. His knees buckle just as his son's did moments earlier. The illusion of his impenetrable power shatters into dust. The agents grip him under his arms, marching him down the stone steps toward the second waiting SUV. He does not look at Natalie. He stares blankly at the gravel entirely broken by the crushing weight of his own hubris. Then a piercing shriek tears through the cold morning air. Eleanor scrambles out of the house. She is barefoot, having lost her designer heels in the chaos of the foyer. Her pristine silk blouse is wrinkled, her makeup heavily smeared down her cheeks. She runs down the stone steps, completely ignoring her husband being shoved into a federal vehicle. She ignores the neighbors who have started to gather at the edge of the wrought iron gates, recording the spectacle on their smartphones. Eleanor makes a desperate, frantic dash across the driveway. She lunges toward Natalie, throwing her body forward with reckless abandon. Before the perimeter agents can intercept her, Eleanor drops heavily to her knees on the sharp gravel. She reaches out with trembling, manicured hands and grabs the fabric of Natalie's tailored pant leg. Natalie looks down. She does not step back. She simply stares at the woman who gave birth to her, watching her grovel in the dirt. "Natalie, please." Eleanor wails, her voice a ragged, hysterical sob. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Please look at me. I am your mother. You cannot let them take my husband. You cannot let them lock up your brother. Please save our family. Fix this. Tell them it is a mistake." Natalie stares at the desperate woman clinging to her ankles. She feels absolutely nothing, no pity, no guilt, no lingering childhood desire for her mother's approval. The emotional manipulation that Eleanor had weaponized for 30 years has completely lost its power. "You do not have a family, Eleanor," Natalie says, her voice as calm and clear as glass. "You have a business arrangement. You traded your daughter for a compliant scapegoat. You traded your son for a shiny corporate trophy. You traded your integrity for a restricted zip code and a country club membership. You built this entire empire on lies, and now you are acting surprised that the foundation is collapsing." "I love you," Eleanor screams, tightening her grip on Natalie's suit pants, tears pouring down her face. "We love you. We were just trying to protect our legacy. We wanted to keep the money safe for the next generation." "Your legacy is currently sitting in the back of 2 federal vehicles," Natalie replies, gesturing sharply toward the SUVs. "Your legacy is a documented trail of forged loan applications and stolen taxpayer money. And as for your love, you only love people when they are useful to your public image. I stopped being useful the moment I refused to be your quiet, invisible disappointment." Eleanor sobs uncontrollably, pressing her forehead against Natalie's knee. "I will give you anything. Take the jewelry. Take my offshore accounts. Just do not let them put me in a cage. I cannot survive in a prison, Natalie. I cannot do it. I am an old woman. You have to save me." "You should have thought about that before you happily co-signed federal bank fraud to fund your luxury vacations," Natalie says, her tone completely devoid of mercy. "You enabled Connor. You protected Richard. You are just as guilty as they are." Natalie reaches down and firmly pries her mother's hands off her clothing. She steps back, smoothing the crease of her trousers. 2 female federal agents immediately step forward, pulling Eleanor up from the gravel by her arms. "Eleanor Adams," one of the agents states firmly, "you are being detained for questioning regarding your knowledge and active participation in the concealment of federal assets. Put your hands behind your back." Eleanor thrashes weakly, her eyes locked on Natalie as the agent secures her wrists with plastic ties. She is hyperventilating, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She looks at her daughter, desperately searching for a single ounce of hesitation, a single crack in Natalie's armor. She finds absolutely none. "You are a monster," Eleanor whispers, her voice shaking with venom as her desperation instantly turns into bitter, raw hatred. "You are destroying your own blood. You will die entirely alone." Natalie smiles. It is a genuine, peaceful smile that reaches her eyes. I would rather be entirely alone than spend another second pretending to belong to you. Natalie turns away. She walks toward her designated federal command vehicle, the morning sun warming her face. She hears the heavy doors of the SUVs slamming shut one by one, sealing her toxic family inside their new reality. The engines roar to life. The flashing red and blue lights paint the front of the sprawling Alexandria estate, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows across the pristine brickwork. Natalie opens the door of her vehicle and slides into the driver's seat. She starts the engine, puts the car in drive, and pulls smoothly out of the heavy iron gates. She watches in the rearview mirror as the tactical convoy follows her down the tree-lined street, carrying the ruins of the Adams family away forever. She taps the screen of her encrypted dashboard console, dialing the direct line to the federal prosecutor's office. She takes a deep, full breath. She feels a profound, absolute lightness in her chest. The little girl who used to hide in the shadows of the mansion is dead. The scapegoat is gone. The independent, untouchable woman who meticulously tore down a criminal empire has finally taken the wheel. "This is Director Adams," Natalie says into the receiver, her voice projecting absolute power and undeniable authority. "The primary targets have been secured. The assets are frozen. The operation is a complete success. I am bringing them in." She hangs up the encrypted receiver and places it back in the center console. Before she can shift the heavy vehicle into gear, a sudden violent scuffle near the primary transport van catches her attention. Eleanor, fueled by a final desperate surge of manic energy, rips her arm away from the escorting agent. She stumbles blindly across the torn gravel toward Natalie's idling SUV, slapping her palms flat against the driver's side window. Natalie sighs, puts the car back in park, and rolls the window down just enough to look her mother in the eyes one last time. Eleanor reaches through the narrow gap, her fingers hooking desperately onto the crisp fabric of Natalie's tailored sleeve. "You cannot just leave us!" Eleanor screams, her voice cracking into a shrill, breathless panic. "We are your family. Who will pay for the defense attorneys? How are we supposed to survive this?" Natalie does not flinch. She does not break eye contact. She reaches up, her movements deliberate, clinical, and painfully slow. She peels her mother's desperate manicured fingers off her sleeve one by one, dropping the older woman's hand back into the cold morning air. "This family taught me a very valuable lesson," Natalie says, her voice echoing the exact venom Eleanor had used on her so many years ago in that pristine dining room. "You taught me that in this world there are no free meals. You taught me that failures must learn to pay their own bills. Your bill is severely past due, Eleanor. It is time to pay." The federal agents quickly close the distance, grabbing Eleanor firmly by the shoulders and pulling her away from the vehicle. Eleanor stops fighting. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow, instantly draining the last bit of fight from her body. She goes completely limp, a hollow shell of the terrifying matriarch she once was. She is loaded into the back of the transport van, and the heavy steel doors slam shut, locking her away. Natalie rolls her window up. She watches the perimeter agents drape bright yellow federal evidence tape across the massive oak doors of the Alexandria estate. The visual is striking. The impenetrable fortress of her childhood, the place where she was constantly reminded of her absolute inadequacy, is now officially the property of the United States government. The manicured lawns are ruined. The illusion of elite perfection is entirely gone. Natalie puts the SUV in drive and rolls slowly down the long, winding driveway. As she approaches the towering wrought iron gates at the edge of the property, she sees a figure stepping out from the shadow of a parked black sedan. It is Naomi. Connor's ex-wife stands tall and completely composed in a sharp camel-colored trench coat, holding a sleek leather briefcase. The woman who was supposed to be nothing more than a quiet, agreeable accessory to Connor's endless ambition. The woman who meticulously gathered the financial ledgers, mapped the offshore accounts, and handed the entire criminal enterprise directly to Natalie's task force. Natalie stops the SUV and rolls the passenger window down. Naomi looks past Natalie, her eyes tracking the convoy of federal vans carrying her ex-husband and former in-laws away. A slow, genuinely satisfied smile spreads across her face. She turns her gaze back to Natalie and gives a single respectful nod. I heard the raid was successful, Naomi says, her voice smooth and radiating confidence. Flawless execution, Natalie replies, returning the smile. The offshore accounts are frozen. The domestic assets are seized. Your intelligence was perfectly accurate down to the last decimal point. They never thought to hide their tracks from me, Naomi says, a sharp edge of amusement in her tone. Connor always assumed I was too stupid to understand his financial maneuvering. Eleanor always assumed I was too weak to ever do anything about it. They made the fatal mistake of underestimating the women they brought into that house. They underestimated the daughter they raised in it too, Natalie adds. Naomi taps the roof of the SUV in a gesture of finality and solidarity. Good luck in Washington, Director Adams. I have a meeting with a major publisher regarding a very lucrative book deal about the fall of a corporate empire. I suggest you go celebrate your victory. Enjoy the royalties, Natalie says. Naomi steps back into the crisp morning air. Two women who were discarded, mocked, and pushed to the absolute margins of the Adams family dynasty have just orchestrated its total annihilation. They did not need a drop of Adams' blood to win. They just needed patience, intellect, and the willingness to let arrogant men destroy themselves. Natalie presses her foot onto the accelerator. The heavy SUV glides smoothly onto the main road, leaving the estate behind. The radio crackles lightly with dispatch updates, but Natalie turns the volume down, letting the quiet hum of the engine fill the cabin. She adjusts her rearview mirror. The massive brick facade of the Alexandria estate grows smaller and smaller in the reflection. The imposing columns, the expensive imported windows, the sprawling gardens that represented generations of corrupt power, all of it shrinks until it is nothing more than a blur in the distance. She watches it disappear completely. A deep, profound sense of peace washes over her. The heavy, suffocating weight she has carried in her chest since she was a little girl entirely evaporates. She is no longer the disappointment. She is no longer the outcast. She is the director of the Federal Cyber Crimes Task Force. She is a woman who holds immense earned power. She does not owe Richard a single ounce of loyalty. She does not owe Eleanor a shred of pity. She does not owe Connor anything but the concrete cell he is about to occupy. Natalie looks forward at the open road stretching out in front of her. The morning sun breaks through the clouds, casting a brilliant golden light across the dashboard. She lets out a long, steady breath and smiles. She is finally completely free. The power of silent resilience. The most profound lesson embedded within the Sweet Revenge narrative framework is that your true worth is never defined by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. In toxic family dynamics, where roles like the golden child and the scapegoat are rigidly enforced, the marginalized individual often spends years hopelessly seeking validation from an impossible source. The narrative's true turning point does not happen during the explosive climax, but rather in the quiet moments prior, when the protagonist stops fighting for a seat at a table where she is continuously disrespected and instead chooses to build her own. This story brilliantly champions the concept of silent resilience. The protagonist's secret weapon, whether it represents newfound financial independence, a hidden creative talent, or a thriving business built from scratch, is not achieved overnight. It is meticulously forged in the lonely aftermath of rejection. By purposefully stepping away from the exhausting cycle of seeking parental or sibling approval, she reclaims her personal agency. True empowerment stems from the realization that you do not need to loudly argue your value to people who actively refuse to see it. Authentic success cultivated entirely on your own terms and completely insulated from the noise of unfair familial expectations will ultimately speak for itself. When the inevitable confrontation finally arrives, the protagonist's ultimate victory is not merely about humiliating her abusers or executing a dramatic plot twist. It is about demonstrating the unshakable quiet confidence that only comes from total self-reliance. The sweetest revenge is simply living a joyful, fulfilled life, entirely free from the heavy, suffocating chains of conditional love. Take a moment today to evaluate where you are seeking external validation and consciously channel that energy into building your own independent success.